I'm on.
All right, well, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order at 7:02.
Let's turn these off. We're all out the window.
Okay, roll call. Donna Kopecki, present.
Lisa Craddock, I am here.
Eric Fisher, present.
Tony Benedetti, present.
Tiffany Hughes, present.
And has anyone heard from Nate?
Yes.
Sick.
Oh,
Sick. Email. A few
Yeah,
minutes
he
ago.
just
Oh,
a
just
few
now?
minutes
Okay.
ago.
Yeah.
okay, well, we can move on to village planning then. And permit discussion.
So for this evening, next meeting, you're gonna have a variance hearing, and then we'll see what other business comes up at that point. So, and the minutes will be ready. In fact, I wanted me to let you know that the minutes, you just been busy, didn't have a chance to get the
What's
minutes
the
out.
variance for?
Variance is for a fence on a strange lot. It would definitely meet the requirements of hardship, but we'll get into that next time. So you'll have that in front of you.
Is it in the new development or over
No,
here?
no, it's an old lot.
Okay.
So it's got some unique conditions. So you'll get to see that. So that'll be.
Can you tell we have no patience? Where is it? What's the address? Sorry, go ahead.
You can get all that sent to you. That'll
Sorry.
get a prayer packet. So that'll be for next meeting, because that's me advertising, so we will.
I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding, but I'm kidding.
So for tonight, we're gonna have a beginning, as this was brought up in some earlier meeting, we're gonna have a discussion about permits and appropriate permits for the village as a whole. Now, what will not be discussed tonight are either building department specific related items or plumbing related items, because those don't have bearing upon our zoning at this stage. So those items are for council and legal council to talk through on a couple of things as far as one right now. The advice that I receive and experience with other municipalities is that building department items are state regulated, and therefore we have our set up a certain way, and if council wishes to so change that, that is their prerogative, so that's a discussion for council and attorney.
Well, but part of this discussion.
That's not gonna be
Eric,
discussed tonight.
listen, let's don't start already, okay? Because
If you
there,
wanna discuss with
I
the
would like to
commission.
bring some things
Yeah,
up,
and
Eric.
so let me
You're
continue
not
my
the final
presentation.
say, so
I'm
don't start, I'm
having,
just telling you.
I'm having a presentation, you're right, and so
Okay.
basically anything with building department is not right for discussion at this commission at this time, because you don't know what council's gonna decide to do, and you do not know where that discussion's gonna go. So if the chair wishes to entertain any of the members' discussion on building departments, that's for you guys to do. I have
Well-
nothing to say about that. What we're gonna talk about this evening are specifically zoning related items and what's entailed with that. And I'm gonna give you kind of my brief overview from the code enforcement professional standpoint and interpretation. All of these items are things that we currently charge for and require permits for. I have, for your own reading pleasure, there are citations where these are each located in the code as to how they are required from a permit standpoint. I recommend that, from a homework standpoint, you read about it, but tonight's discussion mostly is gonna be kind of more of a larger scale discussion of the permits in general, why we do permits in general, why we want them to require them, and then from a village standpoint, you can have the discussion amongst yourself from a recommendation standpoint as to if you think a permit is acceptable, if you think other permits are necessary, if you don't think permits are needed at all. Because from my standpoint, it is the village's prerogative as to whether you require a permit for something or not, and then what you require for that permit. And my job, my duty is to then enforce that under best, conditions. So we can kind of go through these in general, and then I will talk a little bit about kind of how we look at it from an interpretation standpoint and why we do it. And I can tell you that the general reason permits are required in any municipality is because typically it starts out with a health, welfare, and safety concern. And then from there it goes to what we call a quiet enjoyment concern of your neighbors, right? So we'll give you some examples. So if we talk about use, right? If we talk about someone who wants to go through and say they want to put in a new house, it's a good example, right? Houses have setbacks associated with them. Houses have, requirements of where they're located in a lot, how much of your house can encompass a lot. Some of these things are set up during the planning process, and then others are set up on the zoning code itself, right? So for example, with a house, every lot is going to have a buildable area. And they kind of, if you think about the older section, they're a lot more varied in general, okay? But each of these, what we call the R3 district, has a side setback requirement that has to be a minimum of 18 feet in total, meaning the smallest it has to be on one side is 8, the side on the other is 10. On the rear lot, you know, it's 25% of the length, okay? And so typically not to exceed 50, all right? And then the front setback is typically set down by a building line. It can be anywhere on the plat from 30 feet to 25 feet, depending on the plat itself, right? And so typically the house is located within that area. And so from a zoning standpoint, we require a permit because we don't want the house located obviously right on the lot line. We want to make sure that people, you know, typically you want to make sure that you have eyes on something before it gets built, because once it gets built, it gets a lot more expensive for somebody to take it apart, right? It's the same way with decks, with patios, with any of those items. All of those have side setback issues on the lot. They all have some type of setback issue, whether they're a structure or a piece of concrete that goes in there. Even driveways are required to be minimally 10 feet. They have to be 10 feet in width, and they can be no more closer to each side lot than 3 feet, all right? And that's set down in the code. And so we require a permit because we look over that before someone actually does the work. If someone puts it in and has spent $10,000 on a new driveway, as an example, and we find that's wrong, we can make them move it, right? It's not legal. So it cannot only be a certain distance from the sideline, as an example. Sheds are another thing. And this is one that's interesting because as you read through the references, and I do hope you do that.
When you talk about the references, you know about the code number beside it?
Yes, I am.
None of those are all 144208 is the fee. It's the
No,
fees.
those require permits. I'm not gonna argue with you about it. You can have this changed at the council level.
It's not changed at the council
I'm not
level.
arguing this point. I'm not arguing, I'm talking through, you guys are the ones that make a recommendation to council. You guys are the ones that say, hey, we think we need a permit for this. Hey, we think this language needs to be cleaned up. Hey, this, hey, this, hey, this. And then we're gonna follow through on it.
Your understanding of the code right now is woefully
That's fine.
misguided, or I don't even know the nice way to put it.
That's fine. This is what we're doing. So we have to require, so houses, as an example, are under the 1400 reference. They
No,
require a permit, and
It's
we have to.
that code, the
require a
code
permit.
that let's just start at the beginning. The code that requires you to get a building permit is in the building code. It's not 1442.08.
Yes, it is.
That's the fee, that's the code that describes the fee. The code that
So,
describes it,
I'm going
listen,
to
let me
argue
finish. I would like to do this for the rest of our members
I
here.
was speaking.
Is that, okay, well, if it's all right, can I?
Chair, I would like some decorum here, so I was gonna make my presentation. If he wants to go on, or you wanna let him go
Okay,
on
yeah,
about
all right, finish your
code reference,
presentation.
by all means, I would insist that, but I wanna make some decorum.
It's the state, it's not even in our code.
It actually, that is our code. So,
Well,
that is our
here,
code.
let
There's
me,
no- I don't wanna
okay,
argue
can
this point. That's our code, read through, all right? I'm not here to argue the merits of the code. The code's there for us to follow. At this
I'm
point-
glad you put this down on paper, because we don't need to argue about it tonight.
Good.
Because it's in black and white that you don't understand.
No, it's fine. There are permit references to it, all right? And if it's in the code.
Sorry
we
for
can
interrupting
require
your presentation,
It's all right.
please continue.
it. Thank you. So whether or not it's agreed to or not, that's something for council to make determination. Part of your decision making here is a recommendation as to what needs to be cleaned up, what needs a permit, what doesn't. Whether or not my interpretation is actually correct in some people's view doesn't matter at the end of the day. At the end of the day, what matters is cleaning up the code, because I'm not going to be in denial that some of these things are in conflict, in fact, with each other. I can give you a good example. Accessory structures, all right? Accessory structures are cited in multiple locations in our code, all right? Now, sheds are by definition an accessory structure, but they're not clear in a couple of places, right? So if you look under the R3 code as an example, okay? The R3 code for all residents, not including new subdivisions, but under the R3 code, requires that accessory structures be within the same setbacks that a primary structure within, and that's written in the code, right? So that's 18 feet, and they have to meet the rear setback in total, all right? Now, if you go under the other reference, which is under 1272.05, that also refers to accessory structures, and the intent there is that it's for a shed, but it's not called out specifically, and so under that code, it could be within 4 foot of a rear line or a sideline, okay? So that's a good example of something that needs to be more stringently defined, and needs to be added in quite frankly, in a couple places to make it clear, because it's not clear. Like, someone can make the interpretation, and really, quite frankly, the way zoning is typically interpreted is the stricter interpretation applies, right? And so, I know the intent here in this village was that sheds get some more leeway, you know, based on a lot of discussions at P and Z and at council over the years, but it does need to be handled, so that's an example for you to review and look at.
You said 127205.
Yes, and it's on there. So
Oops.
it has, under storage building sheds, there's 1246,
I gotcha.
which is the R3, and it says et cetera, because accessory structures appear in every part of the actual zoning district code. And then under 1272.05 is where we talk about accessory structures and sheds. So that will need to be adjusted, all right? When we talk about, and I want to point out a special case, because I thought we talked about it in this body, and then I don't think we ever pushed anything forward, but we talked about the portable storage units, the big pods, things like that. Council did adopt, and I know what the intent was because I was here, council did adopt a fee for us to help regulate it, and we do require a permit for it. Pods are a strange bird, so I believe, I put policy down there because by policy, we try to help the residents out by allowing it, but it needs to be better formalized in the code in some way. So, because by definition, if someone drops a pod off in front of their house, in the driveway or the street, first of all, the right of way, you can't leave, it's basically a big storage shed that we drop it on. There's no better way to describe it. So when they drop it off, you know, by a strict interpretation of the code, it has no way of being properly defined. We have to look at it as a temporary storage structure of some type, and already where it gets dropped off in the front yard, in front of the building line, or you know, they don't put them in the rear yards, or in the street, you're not allowed to do either or. So what we've done, past policy, and this is also good for the mayor to hear, past policy, we like to know what they're doing with it. We kind of give them guidance on not leaving it there forever and a year, right? We'd like to see them a few days and remove it, and that way it helps us keep track of it. But there's no formal code in regards to the to pods in general, and there probably should be, because other municipalities have adopted how they should be formally handled. So it's something else to consider as well. Signs, of course, familiar with signs, we do require, like most municipalities, there's code for signs, permitting, so forth, we do require it. I put demolition in there too, because that is handled, there's a couple points. Demolition is one of those things that really the way we have it set up in the fee structure, when people take down a shed, or demolition can apply to anything, accessory structure or full structure, we want to make sure that we track things that are more demolished, that are like full-size structures that are permitted by the building department, so we know what's going on when something big comes down. Anything under 200 feet could be a shed, could be someone pulling a deck off because they want to remove it, you know, we really don't. I think at the time that this was put in, there was some discussion, if I recall, a couple of years back, and it just, we didn't want to, you know, overburden either permitting or, you know, our oversight of, you know, if someone wants to move a shed out and bring a shed in, then, you know, we don't need to double bill them in that case. And that's the base overview of all these things. What you guys need to discuss in general is, you know, do you agree these items need to be permitted? Do you want to see anything added? Do you want to see anything subtracted? Do you think, and then as we get into the weeds on it, do you think that if you have a chance to read through some of these, do you think the subject matter, as far as the requirements, do you think something needs a permit? Do you think it's too stringent? Do you think it's less stringent? You know, there's going to be some involved reading in each of these areas. So, and again, whatever council at the end of the day decides, you know, because I think some of these things do definitely need to be cleaned up. So,
Well, which areas is it that they need, I'm trying to figure out what areas where they're supposed to read to come up to speed on this, because I'm still trying to understand. Are you saying 1442-008 is a part of the code that says you need to get a permit for these, all those different things?
it does say that.
No, it doesn't,
Let
Aaron.
me read it to you. So, since you
You're
want to,
gonna read 1442-08, I don't think that's necessary, because they can read it.
Yeah, but we can.
Wait, I have it. 1442.
It's completely quotable, it's right there. So, these things are in our code, and they require us to get a permit for these things, all right?
Where does it say that you need to get a permit?
I will read it to you.
It says fee for new construction, fee, it's
Let me read it.
describing the fee.
Permits and fees, yes, there are fees.
Okay.
They're associated with the permit, let me
The
read
fee
it
for a
to you.
permit to construct a new structure.
Let me read it to you, calm down.
This is.
Yes. So, what we have here is, the fee for a permit to construct a new structure, okay? So the code says for a permit, all right? It is requiring a permit for these things and therefore a fee.
It doesn't say, it says the
The
fee for a permit.
for major remodeling includes room additions, so it defines major remodeling, says that there is a permit and there shall be a fee for that permit. Now,
It
do I
doesn't
think?
say that you need the permit in that.
has
This
it
is
right
where
here.
you're wrong.
I'm not
okay?
wrong. It's an
Listen,
interpretation.
Let
This
me
is a-
explain to the rest of the people.
Go ahead.
You've explained it, you're
Go
over
ahead.
and over again. This is what I'm trying to tell you guys here. That what he's citing is what the fee is. This is what the fee for that, where it's described.
For a permit.
The place, please, the place where it describes that you need to get a permit is in the building code. The state residential building code describes when you need to get a permit for new construction. It describes when you need to get a permit for minor repairs and when you don't need to get a permit. That comes from the state residential building code, not this code. This is the code, and we don't collect fees we shouldn't be collecting fees for building permits because Franklin County should be getting those permit fees.
I hear what you're saying. The council passed a fee schedule where we do collect fees.
Well, we should be. That's a whole nother issue.
That's fine, but that's what the council passed a fee schedule for.
But they passed a fee schedule when they were collecting fees for.
They passed a fee schedule multiple years in a row while I have been here, that you were on one of the councils that passed the fee schedule.
I understand that.
That's what we collect fees for.
Well, that is another issue that if you read the contract with Franklin County for permits, is that they collect all money for permits. They're the
And for
ones
their
that
permits.
issue their permit. What?
It's a building department.
This is a whole nother issue.
So what we're talking about tonight is zoning permits.
Well, we need to
You
get.
have a zoning permit for review for a structure, and there is a building department permit for the construction of said structure, because we don't do building code. We
Okay.
don't review it. There are two separate things. However, the point of discussion tonight is, do these things require a zoning permit? Do you want them to require a zoning permit? Because quite frankly, the building department doesn't care where the structure, as an example, is built on the lot, okay? They don't. They will allow you to build it where you want. Their job is to inspect the construction, okay? Make sure it's
But
built to the
when
code.
it comes to a house, we have to approve the plan as to its zoning.
That's right, and that's what I'm talking about. The zoning permit allows for that, so we control for that. If we do not review for a zoning permit, we do not collect and review for a zoning permit, right? If we say, you don't need a permit from us,
Oh, you're
just from
right.
the building.
We should be collecting a fee for zoning approval.
Correct.
But we collect a fee for building
No,
permit.
we collect it for the zoning, that's what we're talking
Then
about.
why do you keep going back that we have a building permit fee?
That allows for us to ask for a permit. It can be in multiple locations. One problem with the code, and again, I'm not saying that it is the best, this is not the best code in the world, okay? Some of this stuff needs to be reworked and reworded and relocated so that it
Okay.
is clear. That is what I'm saying to you.
Okay, let's go on to decks. Same code.
Yep.
You're citing the very same code. So
Yep.
you're saying
Yeah.
that a deck needs to get a permit because
does.
144208
I
says.
don't have any other reference that says otherwise.
You're right, because it's not, God, you are
I don't have any
unbelievable.
other reference, and so council,
Flippin' believable.
council passed a schedule to allow for the collection of fees for permits.
You're
okay?
right.
And so, the
Just
fact of the matter
because
is,
something
the only
appears on the
reference-
fee schedule
the only
doesn't mean that
reference-
you have to get pay that fee.
Well, actually you do. If we collect a permit for it, you do have to pay the fee. That's absolutely what you have to do.
No,
It's your
because
zoning
we passed, this is one thing I remember from a discussion when we were doing the fee schedule, is that we can create a fee right now today for something that we're going to create next month, next year. That is just establishing the fee. That's what you just can't get that through
How
your
establish
head.
the fee?
There's two different parts of this. Typically in a code, it'll say, refer to the fee schedule.
Back to the-
They always say to refer to the fee schedule because that will change over
So
time.
back
But
to
the
the point.
requirement to get the permit will not typically change. So that's why it's in
So-
two different places.
Back to the point. Still coming full circle. Still need to make a determination and finally a recommendation based on what's put in front of you. If you think we need a permit for these items, if we should do it from a zoning standpoint.
So I agree, I mean, I'm hearing what both of you are saying, and I'm not in, every time I come in here, I get more and more confused from, I mean, I understand the zoning permit versus the building permit, okay, fine. But I also am looking at this, and this is not a judgment against, obviously, you, but I'm gonna say this. 1442.08, in my opinion,
Please say
is, I mean, no, I'm gonna say it this way. Call it an interpretation, call it whatever, it's the only thing we got, so this is what we're gonna use,
Yeah.
code.
It is.
And that's where I have my problem, because I agree with you. It says, construct a new structure, such as a single multifamily dwelling, and I was under the impression we couldn't have a multifamily dwelling
You
in
can't.
here.
Up to three, yeah, it's 1 to 3 or 1
Only
to
in certain
4.
areas.
Yeah, you have some very.
Somebody
small
tried,
areas.
somebody's trying to do that, and the answer was no, anyways, on
Yeah.
my street. And I was told that couldn't be done. Commercial building or garage for a major remodeling which will require 2 or more inspections shall be $100. Major remodeling,
Yeah.
da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Nothing talks about
It is an.
a patio,
deck,
a deck, a patio, so that's where,
Talks it here, where, so the thing is, it is a grayer interpretation, I'm not denying that. It is the only code I can refer to with it, it's not
To try to
normally like
make
this.
what you've been saying
Yeah,
right.
because they've been collecting this, and they've been
Right.
doing it for business this way in the past administration.
Eric, your job
so-
is.
let me, can I,
So actually, my job is,
It's not.
It
to
is.
present-
it is to listen to the mayor. If
It's-
this mayor makes a change and says, I don't want any of these collected for, people can go build a patio without a permit.
I don't
That's
wanna
not a
say-
permit, then I will say that's fine.
here's what I'm gonna say.
Administrative
Wait,
fault.
the
I don't-
mayor or the planning and zoning?
No, the mayor in this
So
case.
the mayor can just say,
Yeah, because, and there's a reason for that, all right, because permits as a duty of review by the Planning and Zoning Commission were, as you recall, removed. So they were made an administrative case. And as we noted at the time it changed, there was a number of references in the code in different places where it still goes back to planning and zoning, but the ordinance overrides that because in changing the duties of planning and zoning. So now you review public items, right? Not the private stuff, so we can help the residents out by not sending them through a 60-day process essentially.
so then
Right.
why are we doing, why
You
doesn't
can make-
the mayor just?
You
that we
can
do
build,
this?
well, because you can make recommendations, this body, you can say, we make no recommendation, we want council to do it, but the fact is, you have a group of residents here, right? Residents who live in the village, right? And as planning and zoning, you've been through a number of these legislative changes over time, both in the duties as well as some other items. You have a duty, in my opinion, as part of your duties, to make a recommendation to the council as to what, because they're gonna need some help and guidance, you're gonna spend some time on this and say, look, we reviewed this, we think, we don't need anything for driveways, right, as an example. But we definitely need to fix this stuff, and we need to make it clear for permits in these other areas, right? Like, for example, decks, patios, home occupations, any of these, even houses. I mean, we collect a zoning permit for a house, and there's a health, safety, and welfare reason for reviewing the code, right? To make sure a house is placed where we want to see it within a platted lot, right? Okay, but the fact is that, you don't have to collect, you can just refer it back to the building department and hope they willy-nilly build it where they need to. Usually builders need guidance in large
Okay.
structure. Spread.
But for us, really, if the mayor wanted to just say tonight, I want a permit for all of these and these are the fees, that would.
No.
no, I
that's
can't
not
change the
how
fee,
it works.
cause I can't change fee schedule, I can't.
Yeah.
Okay,
Fees
so
goes
you
with
could
that.
say I want permit for these, and it would be done. It's
Yeah,
still-
because
No,
there-
it's not
there-
gonna be
there
done. You
is-
have to pass an
there
ordinance.
there is an interpretation, so we, in order to justify taking permits in some of these areas, which is why I've listed the codes here, those are the codes that exist that reference permits and or fees in the code that we use here in Minerva Park, okay? Those codes need to be cleaned up, there's no doubt about that, it needs to be more clear. And in fact, some of this area probably needs to be jettisoned entirely and just rewritten. But like any code, over the course of time, it gets adopted, people utilize it a certain way, make administrative decisions, and, here's where we're at.
Can I ask these are off the wall. Would a deck, a patio, a fence, commercial or residential, would any of those require 2 or more inspections?
No, and it's,
A storage,
sometimes they do, right, so.
because again, I
so
mean,
that's-
There's no way you can.
I guess I'm nitpicking something that doesn't matter, because it says $100 right
Somebody-
here, and these all say 25,
Yeah,
so again, it's all
exactly.
conflicting.
Well, but if you look at the fee schedule.
This was passed back in '04, and what they did in this time frame before we had a kind of a fee schedule by referral passed, was this is the problem, is that every time there was a section, this is how things get messed up, every time there's a section of code, they went to stick very specific items, like fees, as an example, into the code. And the problem is, of course, over the course of time, fees especially change due to inflation and other processes, right? So if you look through there, even signs, if you go into the sign code, there's a section of this code for sign fees, and they're ridiculous, like $5, $10, but it was written back in '88, '89, right? So, what council has done, and I think smartly, is that the fee schedule is by reference. They adopt it, they can change it when need to, and all the fees come back to it, from all of the code. So you don't have to go nitpick and find each section, now that they're still in there, right? And we probably, especially through this process, should go through and remove them, but it is painstaking, and it will take some time. So,
I go back to the same thing.
So maybe.
This is, and I think you're saying it without trying to say it and without whatever, but I'm going back and forth between what they're saying. Like, we don't have anything that says a deck patio. There's nowhere in our code that says you need a permit
No.
for a deck or a patio and da-da-da-da-da-da.
Doesn't say
Besides
that,
the
it's
reference.
never said that, and the mayor has decided that that's where she decided she wanted to do it, when she couldn't do it that way. And that's the way it had been done.
I would
for
disagree
years.
with that, actually, I think she can do it that way. There's a
No,
very-
she can't.
There's a very gray reference, and you can,
No,
you can.
Okay,
work on it.
let's,
Okay.
can we
Does
go?
it even matter? I mean,
Yeah,
we just
because-
need to decide if we want them
Exactly.
and if we wanna charge.
That's exactly
Does
right.
it matter what's in
well,
there now?
It does, in fact, in some ways matter where it's at, right? So I would say, look, if the thought process here, as you go through this, right, to make this an easier, smoother process, I first would recommend you take some time, because right now we're talking at a higher level, but you take some time and read through this before the next couple of meetings, right, especially the next meeting. What can be done is that, hey, we do think decks need to be permitted, as an example, right? And then I will make a suggestion where under chapter 12, we should put it, right? And what wording we should use, and you guys can wordsmith it, and we can make it the way it should be. And at the same time, we'll note where we, this section, look, this chapter 14 stuff in here probably really should go. I mean, I'll say it that far. We probably, once you bring things over that you think should be permitted, and put it in chapter 12, most of the stuff in chapter 14
I
doesn't
think the
probably
stuff
be
in
there
chapter
anymore.
14 is accurate, when it comes to the building permit costs, those are all
But
accurate.
but we don't charge those, the building, our building department charges for those, right? We don't charge those fees, right? So, and that's, again, that's a different discussion.
You mean the county?
The county, correct, the building department, that's who handles the building, department. They charge those fees,
They're
we
not
charge the
okay.
zoning review fees.
So can you give us some kind of guidance on why would you say a permit? Is it, otherwise you're doing it yourself? Or you're just hiring whoever to do it, or what's?
You can always
what's-
do work yourself, right? Now, it's one of those things to where a resident especially, in the commercial area, it's a little different. So we won't get into that, but, because there's certain requirements that separate from residential. But residents, owners have always been given exemptions that they are able to do their own work. I may not be an electrician, but I can go do my own electrical work. Now, the difference there is that you still have to submit to the proper building inspections to make sure I don't catch my house on fire, I don't kill myself in the process, I've done it correctly, right? So you have to do it correctly.
And that's part of the Ohio standards.
That's correct.
So within your
That's what the
permit, it's
certified
not,
building department reviews.
within
not
your
us.
permit, it's not saying you have to get a professional
No,
electrician to do it.
no.
But it has to be inspected.
Yeah, if you want to, under that case, they wanna make sure you do it, because there are electrical codes, right?
Right.
You can't just leave open wires, you have to cover outlets, all kinds of little things that keep people, again, health, safety, and welfare is the overriding way that you need to think about how sometimes these reviews are handled, why codes are on books and books. Somebody died, right, really is what happened, and that's why it's now in statute in some form.
Somebody put a
And
hot
so-
water tank in wrong and whatchamacallit and.
Yep,
If we
burn
want
themselves.
somebody to check, if we feel like somebody should be checking whatever work is done, we need to have a permit
So,
to be able to do.
yes, and I will say, let's focus on the zoning side of things. So as an example, right, so let's say I wanna do a patio, because I've done my own patios. When you're younger, they're a lot more fun. They're not so much fun now as you age, a lot of work, right? So, but I put in my own patio, I did a pretty good job, right? So, but what's important is that sometimes you have to save people from themselves, right? Okay, and the reason is,
That's,
hold up, let me explain the reasoning behind that, right? So if someone wants to go to a patio, that's all well and good. Do you do it where you say, okay, I have in the code that you have to be a certain amount of feet away from my side yard, as an example. I can't be in the side yard, I can't build into the front yard of the building line, yada yada, whatever the code says, okay, as an example, all right? But then someone builds it, and part of the permit, the reason you require zoning permit is to say, let me just check where this is located. right? That's really one of the main reasons you have a zoning permit in the first place. Setbacks are a driving force here, and that affects the quiet enjoyment of your neighbors, right? The reason those are put on the books is to try to keep any usage of the property, away from, neighbors, so everybody can have an equal opportunity to quiet enjoyment, we'll call it that, right? Patios, because people are gonna be active on patios, right? So do I want it right on the property line? The closer I put it to a property line, the closer I get it to my neighbor's house, right? And so,
We have rules about all that.
absolutely, absolutely, so hold up, so if somebody builds it in there and you didn't require a permit, and then I caught them years later, and let's say they have it there for 5 years. So,
There's no difference between if they had a permit or not. If they build it in the wrong place, they gotta move it,
yep.
whether they get a permit or not.
Here's the thing,
Well,
here's the thing,
it's-
from a control standpoint, the reason that we require it in the front is because it's much easier to say, hey, by the way, you've got this drawn 1 foot away from your property line. You need to move this back 2 more feet. Now, if they go do it anyways, that's on them, we've told them. But think about the unhappiness that happens when I approach somebody and we catch somebody who has built something wrong, as Tony has said. Do you think they're pretty pleased that we've caught them and they, I've had this here for 5 years?
It's happened
What are you talking
before.
about? Absolutely. But the fact is that this is what I'm talking about, of saving people from themselves and saving a future cost. Is it easier for us to review it ahead of time and prevent a potential unhappiness like that, and expense to the resident, quite frankly, down the road, because we caught it for $25 or $20 or $0, it doesn't matter, right? You can charge 5 for it, that's a council thing, so whatever they wanna charge. But is it better, most municipalities have decided, it is better to do this in the front end.
I
rather
would
than
question
go
how
and
many
catch it on the back.
municipalities have decided that that's better to do that. The thing about these permits is that it doesn't prevent anybody from doing whatever they want. It's happened, people have been required to get fence permits and they still do it wrong.
Well, so if you have,
and
if
there's
you
no
have an
di-
inspection though, and you go back and inspect if they're,
You also know that they're doing
if
the
there are a
work.
couple, you go
right?
back and inspect it when it's done and it's wrong, then you have them redo it.
Right, and you do that whether they get the permit or not.
But you wouldn't know that
Well,
they were
no,
doing it
you
without a
can't,
permit.
if they don't have a permit, can you go on their property and
Yes, you
say?
can, because
You
it's the
actually-
homeowner's responsibility
You
to
actually-
find out where they're allowed to put a
So.
No,
patio.
I'm just
if I
saying,
may.
so my neighbor puts in a patio, we don't have a permit or any reason for
So if I'm-
somebody to go look at it.
We
Can you
do,
just go
we have
look
the
and say that's
authority.
not done
So,
right?
We
so
have the
here-
authority.
So, hold up, actually, that's incorrect.
No,
So-
it isn't.
If I can see from the street that someone has done something, or the neighbor invites me into their yard to say, hey, I think they did something wrong, and I can physically view it and take a photo of it, I can enforce it, right? I, however, do not have the authority to wander up into someone's yard and conduct an inspection, just willy-nilly. I have to utilize either an existing access easement, public right-of-way, or someone has to invite me onto the property, okay? Now, if someone has built a patio out of, let's say they've got a 6-foot fence around the property, and they decide they're gonna concrete a bunch of stuff around the edges, all right, as an example, it could be a number of things they could do. I don't have any way to see this, nor can I do an inspection. Now, if you require a permit, part of the agreement of doing a permit is that you agree as part of the permit to allow an inspection, to be done on the property. That's typically what's written into the paperwork, okay? And so under those circumstances, I have the right, because of the agreement, to
We'll
go
just
on
buy
the
a
property.
drone. We'll just buy a
You
drone.
can't do that, that's not legal either, you're not allowed to do that.
That's
But- but
Airspace.
why would you-
Air-
why would
you own the
do that?
airspace.
Why don't
You
you?
You
You own
can't,
the
there's an
airspace.
airspace, you can't cross people's property lines, whether it's from here or not. There's been plenty of court decisions on that already. You can't do that.
Okay, but what's the negative about just saying, yes, we want to have this permitted and we want to inspect them? What is there
I don't know,
something
Tony
really
would have
that
to
bad
explain.
about that?
That's not my.
I think it's a waste of people's time and money,
Who's?
the homeowner. Why do you have to pay?
Well, if they wanna, I don't know, if they wanna do it, it's gonna cost them their time and maybe a fee. I guess I don't see really the negative of it.
Of making people, because people shouldn't, in my opinion, and it's not our responsibility to make sure people are doing things correctly at their house.
Well, you don't think so, but
It isn't.
maybe,
We need
Other
to, we
people
need to
too.
provide the information
Maybe that's-
that this is where you're allowed to build, where you're not allowed to build a deck or a shed. That information, it's incumbent on the homeowner, if they're going to build a fence even, or a deck, to put it where, in their property, or in the right spot. It's their responsibility to find out where that's at.
And if they don't,
Then if they build it in the wrong spot, they gotta move it.
or what happens in the case of a friend of mine, she had a fence, she thought it was hers, and when the people left, they took it. It was on her property, they thought it was theirs, and they took it.
That's between your
But how
neighbor.
does she know?
How does she know
I mean,
what?
you're depending on the person next door to do it the right way, and now she's without a fence.
But whether
Because
they would
their
have gotten a
neighbor
permit or not, it
stole
wouldn't
What
matter.
is a permit
Well,
gonna
if there
do
was
to
a
help
permit,
that?
you would be checking, wouldn't you? Whoever's
Checking when
inspecting it
someone-
would go back to make sure that it's in the right place.
We would make sure
Isn't that part of the?
Yeah, that's correct. So on a fence, so as an example for a fence, right? So yeah, they have to submit on the plot plan where they're putting the fence. Many times, we've run into it where they have put the fence in the wrong place, and we correct them. And we also advise, and this is a legal issue, but we do advise homeowners to please have a survey done, a current survey, especially in the older part, of where the lot lines are. Because it saves them, a surveyor, a certified surveyor, can protect, that's a legal document, that's protection.
So that's not part of our deal.
No, they have to, that's incumbent upon the homeowner, it's simply recommended that they do that. Good fence companies do that as part of the fee, because they don't wanna be held responsible for
The funny thing
fence.
about a
But what I'm
survey that says
saying,
not
if
to be
we
used
do
for
this
fences.
And we have
I
inspections,
never looked at one.
if they haven't had a survey done and we're going to inspect to make sure it's where it's supposed to be,
What we
if they
do-
haven't had the survey, we don't really know anyway.
What we do.
Exactly.
So let me explain. We tell them, so if they don't have a current plot plan, the next best option for them, if they don't wanna pay for a survey, we don't require them to do it, right? Typically, people have it with their mortgage documents, but if they don't, sometimes the older homes they don't, they will simply get a printout of the auditor's website, so at least they can see where their boundary line is supposed to be. And then it's their job to make sure that it stays on the property. As part of our code, they want us to go out and see where the holes are, and we can go out and see where the holes are. And we're not surveyors, it's true, but we can typically see if it's close, right? If it's where it's supposed to be, it's where they marked it. But again, that's not our fault, if the fence gets built in the wrong spot. But we do our best to make sure the fence is within the property line bounds. And not-
Because they have the plot plan with the information on it, or you're saying they don't have to have the plot plan anymore?
They may or may not, we
It's
don't
not
require,
required.
a current survey. No municipality makes you get a current survey for fences. It is beholden upon you to do this
I
yourself,
don't mean
it's
the
recommended.
survey, I mean the lines that.
So they may or may not, the newer subdivision people have a plot plan, for all their permits, we have a copy of each one for those lots, because it's a new subdivision, and we got electronically. So we have them all, we can print them for those people. For the people in the older part of the subdivision, some of them have been in their homes a long time, some of them can't find it, it's not necessarily.
Usually part of the mortgage
Yeah,
paperwork.
they don't, they've lost it.
When they
So in
were
this
bringing
case-
them to us, they were showing us that
But they
information.
don't all have it. I'm not sure what we're talking about here. What happens is the other option, again, is we do a printout
Okay,
to scale of the auditor's plot, right?
Right.
The auditor marks it, the auditor has the
Okay.
lines. That's what we use, and typically, because it's nice because there's an aerial, they can see the physical parameters of their
Right.
lot with those guidances on it, right? And it's up to them to do it correctly, or have their fence contractor do it correctly, right? When we talk about fences.
okay, but if they're showing us this, and they're doing, just say the fence,
Mhm.
and we're inspecting it.
Yeah.
We are inspecting to make sure it is
Typically,
where it's supposed
close,
to be within their yard.
close
But
enough.
yeah, what
We're
we
not-
say isn't,
We're not definitive on, right,
It's
we're not
not.
definitive on where the lot line is, because we're not surveyors, none of us are, right? We don't have a certified surveyor on staff that goes out and survey people's lines. That's the reason we say, for your protection, get yourself a surveyor to mark your lot lines, and they'll come out for a fee and mark the lines, so that way, the guy who's doing the fence knows where those lines are, exactly.
But we can't,
Cannot-
we could require them to do
You
that?
could do that, it's not something that's typically done, I will tell you, it's just not, people,
It's a couple $100s.
it is, it's $200 to $300 for a standard one, absolutely. Depending on, your lot's gonna be a little more expensive as an example.
Yeah, mine would be
But it's-
probably about 1,000.
Yeah, yours is a
So-
little bit
It's
bigger.
specific, depending on the size.
Yeah, it is, it's depending on whether they're out there, all that kind of good stuff. Or if they can find the pins, sometimes they gotta relay pins, and they gotta go through more.
We had somebody pay $22,000 for 21 acres.
Yeah, that's typical. That's a
Is
lot.
that why they don't usually require it? Because it's expensive?
No, that's a good question, I think,
the thing about the surveys, if you look at one of them, it also says on these surveys not to be used for putting up a fence. That's an ironic thing about
that's because you want the lot lines marked. But you have to have something that people
I-
can mark their bounds and see where they're at, right? To at least know where their edge lines are. They have to, people wanna do it themselves, that's part of the risk, right? Risk reward. Now, they can, you know, and most good fence companies, again, will say, hey, for $300, our surveyor will come out and make sure we mark the lines. Otherwise, we'll put it where you want it, but we're not, you're signing paperwork that says, you're not responsible for the fence guy's mistake if you didn't have a surveyor done.
Right.
You know, so that's, it is iffy overall, that's a little iffy part of the fence work.
When I did mine, we had an existing fence and it was around to where the garage was. It wasn't even half, it was not anywhere near half an acre. But I printed out the Franklin County page and brought it into Scott Dollinger or whatever, is that what his name is?
Yes, Scott.
Yeah, Dollinger. I brought it in, planning and zoning at the time when we had to do it. And it was, I'm glad they don't do that anymore. They had to have asked me 800 questions. Like, I wasn't even going to the end of the house. So, I mean, there are people that are putting up fences that aren't trying to get all the way to their lot lines. Like,
Right.
my fence is nowhere near my lot lines
perfectly fine.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, I had to answer like 872 questions about, I mean, it was like they were asking questions to try to like, it was horrible.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, we weren't going anywhere near where our lot lines were. We were inside of the,
inside the bounds.
way inside the bounds. I mean, we didn't even go to the end of the house and we weren't anywhere near the other side of the house. So it was just a small area for the pets. So, I mean, some of the ones in MI, and I really, this is where I feel like we should have had something going on. The way that some of those people did their fences, I mean, we missed the boat on that because, I mean, there's spaces like this between them and some people have this. It is I mean, I can only imagine what it looks like flying over top of those.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much worse it's gonna get when people continue to do it, but I just see weeds this high is all I'm envisioning eventually.
Yeah, because who's taking care of that space in between the fences?
Someone's
The
responsible.
council has, yeah, that's
I guess,
true.
yeah.
The council still has the option to adjust the development text. That
Right.
was part of the original agreement in regards to adopting a fence.
Well, and I don't really know
Policy.
what to do. I mean, I just, it's one of those things that, and I like, who owns what fence or whatever. I just wish more people would have gone together and said, let's work together and figure out.
But
That's right.
could they
And that's
not,
where
And they
you-
didn't.
you
could
can
they not
adjust it.
join them? Is
No,
that why they kept them, I just figured they had to
So-
keep them separate.
No, no,
So why
before
would
people
you
started-
split the money?
so before people started building the fences over there, the council could have adopted, and they opted not to, because they wanted to keep it the way it's done over here, right? They wanted to make it equal, but they had the option to say, we could require a specific type of fence, we have the option to require a specific height, we could require other, conditions, right? So you have to follow your lot line, as an example. You could have done that versus kind of willy-nilly stuff, right? That was not an option. Those are ways that you make it, some subdivisions have shorter fences.
That
as
was
an
a
example.
decision though,
That
it
was a
wasn't.
decision by council. It's not over with. A concurrent council can always go back and do it. Just the problem is now, all
It's
the
already there.
existing, well, it's not too late. Remember that what happens over the course of time is that fences fail, and then what happens is once people take fences down, and it may take 20 years, right, to some of these cases,
Yeah.
but the institution of the zoning goes on forever. And
It's too
so
late.
you will eventually get it to where it needs to be, but it takes time, right? It's gonna take you 20 years. Will be my estimate, because these are.
I feel like that was something that came up when this whole thing started, was to get these things figured out and on the books so that you have control over stuff like that.
Yep, you still can, but.
Yeah, but I mean, okay,
can.
you can, but it's too, they're,
It's.
A lot
are
of,
rough
yeah,
It's gonna
a
be
lot
ugly
are
for a
done.
while.
yeah.
So, but if you don't change it, if this is an idea, then 20 years down the road, someone sitting around this table is gonna be complaining about it. Why didn't we do this 20 years ago? Well, you should have started 20 years ago, right? So I'm telling you, if you do wanna make a change, not doing anything ensures that nothing ever changes. Because this is not, you're gonna have multiple owners, you're gonna have fences that fall down for various reasons. Once damage is done, or the fence is done with its useful life and has to be replaced, they have to conform to the current zoning.
Here's the way I view this
Doesn't
over there. I feel like those were people that nobody had to get, like, in my mind, I just feel like we obviously didn't require permits or anything, or else it wouldn't look like that.
We did.
Oh, I know we did, but I'm just saying, that's where I feel like we
Yeah,
totally
but
missed the boat
what's
because it's
process?
horrific.
Well,
They come in-
I think though, cause I was involved with some of that, I remember going on and on about bringing the fences forward instead of having it at the back line, and it was all so important, and what if people had dogs to let out? None of those houses, that I can tell, have doors on the side of the house to let dogs out, so that was moved. But the whole thing, like you see the vinyl, you see the vinyl and the wood connected, that drives me crazy.
You have
And I don't know if
different-
you can
you have
say
different
like they all have
materials,
to be
different
the same,
types.
but if they're that close, they really should be
I
the
think
same.
people tried to focus too much on the old and the new and not,
Exactly.
but they're not the same. I mean, as much, we
Yeah.
can all still, be, hold hands through the park, but I mean, as far as that goes, you aren't dealing with apples and apples, so why did we try to treat it as an apple? So just like the HOA thing, I mean, they have much more maintenance than than we have over here, so in the long run, I get why they did it, but
Well,
am I off base to say that there is not another development probably in the last, that has over, let's just go over 50 houses? Is there another development in central Ohio that you're aware of that does not have an HOA?
No, this
Because
is the
I have
only one,
not.
to my knowledge, that.
In 10 years at
done in
least.
the modern times, 20, I would say.
Probably 20.
And the reason being, now I will caveat this by simply saying, there are places now where certain municipalities, i.e. Pataskala,
I didn't know what they were
take
doing.
over their HOAs because they went bankrupt,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so the public still steps
But-
in and they have to correct a hot mess.
right, but that doesn't surprise me, because what people don't understand is, it costs so much money now for maintenance, and to do that kind of stuff, from
Yep.
the fences that these people have, and those 3 detention ponds, retention ponds, I always call it wrong, so I'll just call it both. To maintain all of that kind of stuff, we know how bad our particular lake is. I just, again, we're getting off topic.
Yeah.
We missed the boat. I mean, I understand that their taxes are high and they all have to pay income tax, so do we, but there is going to be an extremely large expense
Well,
15
I would
years
like
from
to
now
start
over there.
How can
about
you
that.
tax them at the same rate and charge them HOA? I think that was one of the issues was,
We don't
How
have
can we
wrought
do it?
iron, we don't have fences that we have to
You would have-
maintain, we don't have sidewalks, we don't, I mean, cause again, we still have to hire people to go over and mark X's and with and all of the green space that's over there that we're taking over, the amount of green space we have over here compared to over there, not even remotely comparable.
no.
So,
Small
I mean,
subdivision.
you have to understand, we got an estimate to do the green space over here, and then the green space over there, not even in the ballpark of how much that is compared to this. So, again, yes, they're paying higher property taxes because their houses are more expensive, but that was their choice.
right.
It was their choice
Well,
to
it's
add
all-
in.
It's all relative percentage wise.
Correct.
They're paying the same.
Correct, it
percentages
is,
more.
so,
Is it too late to, I mean, they probably freak
have to
out.
write-
Oh, yeah,
You
no.
can't create an HOA, like they all have to agree to it.
right,
Which they wouldn't at this stage. One of the,
No way.
one of the advantages of living in this municipality is that, quite frankly, I don't, it's not, in my view, it's not a bad decision what the village has done overall, because you inherit, yes, it costs a little more money, but the fact that you have green space and
A
you
little?
have parkland. Well, it's relative, right? So I've seen park systems that are much more exorbitant than this one, right? This is minor, right? And you're gonna have revenue coming in and you'll balance the books in that regard and you'll still be at a profit, right, at a plus. And people get to enjoy that, that's public property, right?
yeah, the good news is, at least, yes, our taxes are paying to, their taxes are paying for it too, but we do have the walking spaces, we do have all of that, and we have a lot of money that it's gonna cost to repave those every single time we have to. So, I mean, there's just little things like that, a lot of people just didn't think about. So, I think it's great.
that might be it, like you think you've thought of everything, but
No,
you don't know until it's there.
oh, I know, yeah.
And the HOA thing is very interesting because one item that they can't control for and that the village passed on was the fences, right? Again, most HOAs would have specified a very limited type of fence and all the requirements of, or maybe not fences, depending on, where you were at. That's also a requirement. I'm not allowed to have a fence, in my yard, so it's just the way it is.
I remember at some point saying that people in the green space couldn't have a fence.
No,
I don't know
that
what
was,
happened to
that was
but-
untrue. I don't know why.
There was a time when the code read that there were
Okay.
spots beside the green spaces that could not.
I remember
It's
hearing
not-
that as
It
well.
did not get adopted that way, so that may have been a discussion, a draft, but at the end of the day, it didn't get adopted.
Okay, so
So-
going back to this, I mean, as far as the signage goes for commercial buildings, I mean, to me, yes, that is definitely stand on the books, period. I mean, as far as that goes.
I would recommend
What'd
just
you say?
changing.
I started at the easy ones, like signs.
Signs,
Well,
yeah.
sign, yeah.
Yeah, so I
That's a
started at the
code
easy
that
one.
That's a
I
code
would
that needs to
say-
be looked at.
I'm not saying it's only
I
limited.
would say in the signs, you do need to take out the existing fees charts that are embedded into the code, right? Those-
Aren't they like $5 or something?
Something stupid, yeah.
Okay.
Those just need to be adjusted, so you will need to make a text adjustment and eliminate that. So,
Okay, does that mean we don't have to read and decide since Tiffany's decided?
you don't, I mean, I can make a suggestion.
Yeah, that one I'm putting on there, because here's what I'm gonna say, it's part of our commercial, it's part of our, the look on Cleveland Avenue, it's part of the look on different things, and I think that it needs to be, I think that's one of the things that many residents struggle with, is the appearance of
Yeah.
our,
Well,
all of our
and
areas.
enforcing the codes too, because I think there's some signs up there that have more colors. You're only allowed to have 3 colors on a
right,
sign.
I think we need to review it, and I think we need to look and
black
see.
white.
Okay.
Yeah, so 5, I think, but yes, and the logo is separate of the actual sign colors, fonts, things like that, so they have a patent, or not, copyright logo, that they can put that up there, so just like McDonald's or someone else, you can't make them change their
Yeah,
logo.
you can. I know they do in Gahanna. Here we are into another
Supreme
thing.
Court says you can't.
Wow, Gahanna,
You have to,
they
you have
cannot
to say
use.
no logos
listen,
at all.
You cannot use the red, the McDonald's red and the Wendy's red in a sign in
So
Gahanna. It is illegal.
I'm gonna, I know that there are some places that think that that's okay. And I'm just gonna tell you that you have to either, you have no logos whatsoever, so it's completely, all commercial properties are treated equally. Or if you allow logos, you cannot make them change a copyright logo. Now, sometimes.
You can tell them you can't use
Sometimes,
it.
in the past, some have done, some have required it, some municipalities did make people change some things, there were lawsuits over it, okay? So.
Yeah, cause I feel like there was some in New Albany that are
That's a free
uniform.
speech issue to some degree.
You
Yeah,
can.
so, and sometimes, I'll be honest with you, sometimes the big corporations will simply say, yeah, we'll go along with it, we've got it designed.
Okay, so there's a lot of neighborhood, I
A big
mean,
corporation will go
there's a
along
lot of
with it.
neighborhoods, real estate
Sometimes they
signs
do.
have to be the exact same
Sometimes
color.
franchisees,
So, I
yeah.
mean, there's different things like in different, yeah, so I don't know. Okay, so we need to adjust the text and then, look to
We know
decide
about
what we wanna do,
signs,
signs.
okay.
Okay, I'm gonna skip to swimming pools. Obviously, if somebody's installing a swimming pool, they have to have a permit. That to me would be insane not to do it. Now, I obviously see the word spa, so somebody decides they're gonna throw a hot tub on their back porch. Do we
Well,
consider that the same or
swimming
not, or?
pools is another one that,
Nobody's gonna install a swimming pool on, oh no, now you're, never mind, I thought that was gonna be an easy one. I'm talking about a built,
So you thought-
in-ground,
okay, here's the thing, well,
Pool.
that's not the way, okay, you guys need to read this.
now we're screwed again,
To
sorry.
read the thing about, in my opinion, it is, needs to be looked at, is that anything over 2 feet deep
Okay.
is considered a swimming pool
I thought it
that
was 3.
requires a no, in our code it's 2.
I was thinking it was 3 and then
He's-
10 feet in
he's not
diameter.
wrong. So different.
Thank you,
codes,
Eric.
right? He's not wrong. No, I just mean, your intent is not incorrect, because there's a lot of discussion about, what if I wanna have something for my koi fish in the back, right? And so,
Well, you have those pools that are freestanding
Yeah,
that are more than
yeah.
3.
Oh, yeah, they're like
there's a
4
lot of-
foot.
3 or 4 feet
Mhm.
high.
there's,
Like
And
you're gonna have
that
a 4
would
foot.
require a permit.
yes, it would.
And there's some up, I saw
So-
one up this past year that I know they didn't get.
That's a very big debate and on a lot of levels, because we get into,
Fences around them?
well,
That's where our code
Yes,
requires, is
so
that if you were to
it's
put
the
a pool up that's over 2
the
foot,
state-
it has to have
the
fencing.
state
in it.
building code.
Yeah.
You have to have a fence to keep toddlers and small children, animals even from drowning in the pool,
Right.
right? So, the problem we get into with those big ones that you can inflate, and I used to own one, I put it on the back of my patio I built, so, for a while my kids were small. Now, I had a fence around my yard, okay, but in a lot of quarters, and building departments especially, when those go up, municipalities have dealt with all these very differently, they're a little controversial, because when they get big enough, they're just like having a small above-ground pool, right? And so the decision here is, do you think that there is a size that is appropriate for just being a child's pool versus, you can buy big enough that adults can hang out in them, right? And suddenly they become they become above-ground pools. And once they've reached that level, I mean, the building department may have a completely different view of this based on interpretation of state code.
They have
in
no
this regard.
code regarding swimming pools.
Yes.
In the state code.
Yes.
Nothing.
Okay.
They don't.
So, once they get above a certain size and they become above ground, our code, and forgive me, most municipal code says you should have in-ground pools. Do we allow?
No,
in-ground
it
pools?
doesn't say.
No,
one way or
because
the other.
ours was, I don't know what mine was. You had to walk up the stairs
So
and
it was an above ground.
we had a
pool,
4 foot to
gap
8 foot.
around, you know.
So above ground pools are okay here,
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay, except I think in the subdivision, the development text, they're not, they're verboten over there, so, okay, fine, so.
where would you put one?
So the
In
question,
there?
I know, right?
well, Yeah, people
Never
have a
mind.
little lap pool, you know, the one that shoots the water out, it's just a little 6 feet by 8 or whatever it is. So, you have to decide now, this is a good point of discussion. Do you think, because sometimes people view these pools differently. Above ground pools also have a different level of maintenance, they tend to fall apart, you know, once they start, you know, any pool can have algae. So, you can think about this as well in this regard, do you leave it as is, do you like above ground, below ground, do you treat them equally? Do you not want above ground pools at all and have only in-ground pools? That is something to consider while you're going through this. So, you know, if there's no opinion, you leave it as is. If you think that, you know, some municipalities have viewed, and many of them I should say, view the above grounds as detrimental over time to property values, and some of them have outlawed them. So,
Well, but you got the above ground that are temporary, they come up and down every.
well, and that's what we get into. So once you disallow above grounds, and once they get big enough, suddenly they do start meeting, that's what I'm getting at. So they do start getting to that point where, hey, that's actually an above ground pool, it should meet the requirements of a pool period, right? So get into a fence, we get into certain protections, things like that, because they should be treated, I think they should be treated the same way. Once you get to a certain size, what's that size? That's where the controversy is, right? How deep is it, how wide, how
Well, and
big?
then how do you go about making it safe?
Exactly.
You know, that's
Exactly.
the hard.
See,
That's
we had,
absolutely-
ours was in a fence, but we had stairs that went up into the top part, and we had the stairs flipped up,
Right.
so,
See,
and
that
there was a lock
really,
on
I
it.
think for me, it gets down to the whole discussion about, is it okay to have a removable stair? Is that all, you know, because in order to get for a kid to get into it,
Yeah.
the stair has to be there.
Oh, if
And
you
is it
didn't,
okay just to take the stair away and then we're good?
right,
I mean, that's the whole.
if you didn't remove the, if you didn't put
crux
those
of
stairs up,
the-
Once you have something you define as a pool though, you do have to meet the code in regards to fencing too, that's the other thing.
Right.
Regardless of
Or
what,
you could have different description of above ground
you can,
and below ground.
you can, yeah,
In ground.
it becomes, it's tricky and it is controversial, so I mean, this one,
The reason I bring it up is because I saw a pool that was up that should have had a permit, you know, and fences and all that stuff, you know, and
yeah,
that didn't happen.
the easiest answer that I'm gonna say is swimming pools are one of the things that I grew up with one, so they freak me out when people don't. So many people don't pay attention to it, and just so you know, these detention ponds freak me out. I mean, I'm watching little kids that are like this with absolutely no supervision around these, and I'm hyperventilating already, so all I'm gonna say is,
fair enough?
be warned. So, I mean, as far as that goes, after a certain amount of time, some of these stand up 3 foot, 4 foot
Pleasure.
that sit there for a year look a little deteriorated and
They do.
disgusting and,
Which suddenly jumps into our maintenance code, they can do
Right.
something for that, but the question is, at that point, they're being treated as a permanent above ground pool type structure
Right.
too, right? And so they should meet the code of a normal pool, and that's what so we've gotta carefully define it, and that's gonna take some work, right? So that one you're gonna have to come back to, and that one of all of these, quite frankly, will be perhaps the most challenging to get it, what we call right, or to get something that you feel comfortable with.
is that something we could potentially pull a couple different ones
Yes.
from what other municipalities have? And just kind of, not that we're gonna adopt exactly what any of them have, because it's something that,
Yep.
again, I think safety first when it comes to something like that
Yep,
versus making friends.
we can do that.
You're saying the pool one?
Yeah, the pool and
Is gonna
spa.
be most difficult?
I do, just from experience, I think, you know, most of these other ones are straightforward in many ways. I mean,
So, oh, you
aside
s-
from our own code deficiencies,
Right.
once you say, hey, I think we should have a permit for this, that's a recommendation, then you just write the code.
So here's
Right?
my question,
Straightforward.
a spa to me is hot tub.
Yes,
So
that's-
if they're doing a hot tub on a back deck right now, they have to get a permit.
Well, two things on that. So the answer is yes, consider this. Hot tub spas also have electrical wiring, all kinds of nifty things that have to be handled, and that gets back to a building department. So when
I would
we-
assume plumbing and everything.
Yeah, so we may be okay with them, right? But you still may wanna say, hey, we wanna let you know, you gotta do this, you gotta go to the building department and have this all inspected and done, so nobody electrocutes themselves.
Aren't
in
they
the
like
tub,
220?
catches on fire.
Don't you have to have
Well,
like
it
a, or no?
depends on, I mean,
Depends on-
I guess technically speaking, you would need to get a permit to run 220.
You have to do your
That would
electrical
be the only permit.
Yeah, and that very well might be. I don't know
So-
what else they require.
So, we
So-
know of a few people around here, and this is just a curiosity thing. I wanna give Kelvin a couple of addresses and see if they've ever gotten them. I'm just interested to know, again, have we I mean, there's ones that you can visually see, so I'm
Well,
just,
but how do you, well.
no, I'm not saying that we would, I'm just saying
Well, what I'm saying
curiosity
is,
wants
how
to
do you
know.
think- How do you prove that they didn't have the electric there?
Well, then you easy, you would pull a permit from there, say, hey, did you get a permit for, I can ask the building department, they can look up the
The
address.
two twenty, probably not.
Did you get this done? Oh, they didn't, okay, go see them, so the building department can handle the enforcement of that, I mean, that's not on us.
Well,
I was just
but it comes
curious.
down to proving whether, when they got it.
Yeah, and somebody could have done it before they moved it. I'm not
Right.
saying to
Yeah, but-
enforce it now, again, it's just a curiosity
I
thing,
know
so
what
this
you're
is,
saying.
this
It
is
would be
clearly
very
on the
hard.
book.
If it's after the fact, it would be very hard to prove.
Right, and I wouldn't try to, I think it's just a matter of, once again, what are we really enforcing and who's, but I don't think anybody was enforcing
No,
those
but it
things.
really- and this is the, and I don't know, see, we're gonna have a council meeting specifically talking about what we wanna have for permit, what we want to do permitting wise. And I think from this body should hold off.
Well, it would be nice to
whether we
just
wanna
get,
But these things that we're talking about, like, the things that we do need to concentrate on, the planning and zoning, is what do we wanna do for swimming pools, that's a hard
Right.
one. And the next one, if we go to
home
storage,
occupation? Oh, okay.
buildings and sheds, is I will agree that we do have a code that says you need to get a permit for that. And it is 1246, one of the few on this list that's right, I like to say, is that, but the thing that's not in our code is what is an acceptable shed? I mean, are metal sheds allowed? I mean, to get right to the crux of it, do we wanna outlaw metal sheds or not? Or, because right now, there's no description in our code about what kind of a shed is acceptable.
Yeah, you can buy the plastic ones,
You
the
can
wood
buy-
one, that you
and
can
so
build one.
this is why, I don't understand why we're requiring people to get a permit. The only thing that we're really determining is if it's put in the right spot or
That's
not.
right.
Other than that, and that's why I don't think we need to get permits for these things. That our only thing we're doing is deciding whether they're putting it in the right spot.
So by not getting permits, we of course have sheds that appear, whether they get the permit or not, different issue.
Well,
But at
look
least
at-
if they get the permit, you can tell them when they wanna locate it on public grounds, which has happened multiple times, hey, that's the
Gordon Road.
village property, you can't put it there, as an example, or you can't put it on your neighbor's yard. The reason you get a permit again is to control for a later, more expensive problem in some of these cases. You wanna make sure that they know what it is, you have the opportunity to tell them it up front. If they still do it, that's on them, right, you told them. So, it's easier to handle these things in the front, is my only argument with some
Well,
of these.
I appreciate you keep bringing up the point for having permits.
That's
Okay.
the reason that you do it, so.
I understand why they do it. It's my opinion that, for me, another side of this is the staff, the requirement from the staff here. Is that why we spend the time and energy going out here to look at their fences in the right spot, when we don't really even know, oh, it looks like it is, you know?
And you know what, when I had my fence done, he didn't even wanna look. He didn't come out to do the post hole
They
inspection.
never came to my house.
Like, I called him and he was like, nah, we don't need to
Then
do
you
it.
got a permit
No.
Yeah.
from here, and
Oh,
nothing
yeah.
happened.
No.
Well, it's like, was that
Yeah,
a waste
and
of
then,
money?
and then afterwards, he didn't wanna.
And yours
to
was
do-
recent.
Yeah, that was in the spring, yeah.
It's
Cause
just-
I called him, I was like, okay, they're coming on this date to do it, do you wanna do the inspection? And I knew that we could also do the inspection on his behalf if he wasn't gonna be working that day, and I was like, I can take pictures of, I can.
Right, so you went through this process,
Yeah.
and it really didn't accomplish anything.
Yeah, he was like, well, you're using a contractor, they know what they're doing, is
Okay, well,
just what he said,
If
so.
you guys wanna skip over to special permits, for takeoff and landing of helicopters. I'm just kidding, it's really in here. So I mean, we have helicopters in here, a heliport. However, we do not have
Well, you know
a section for anything else.
Are you funding a helicopter now?
Yes.
Are you gonna have one to?
I need I need a different form of,
So we're gonna
Transportation?
sell the ambulance
She needs to get one with
and
pontoons
get a
on
helicopter,
it.
right?
I need one with pontoons. Okay, so can we get at least one of these, figured out, cause this one's gonna be a bad one too.
Home occupation?
Yeah,
Are we
sold.
going to that now?
Yep.
Cause that's the other big one.
Well, I mean, here's what I'm gonna say. I mean, as far as deck patio and I wanna go back to one thing. I don't wanna be the one to make the decision. So like he says, it's a gray area and this and that. That's not what I want. So it's something that between you guys and council, no, I want you guys to make the decision and I will support what the outcome of the decision is. I think it's important to have the residents involved and planning and zoning and council. So when it boils down to a deck, I see the benefits of a permit, there's no question about that. I also Don't give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and that's probably where I'm a little different than everybody else. I know that there's people that do it on Saturday when nobody's home and they're just gonna do it. For what? To save $25? For me, Eric and I talked about this earlier, it's not about the money for me. My family does contract, they're contractors. So if I wanna have a window done on a Saturday, I don't wanna have to worry about whether or not I'm gonna get in trouble for having a permit. So I know it's gonna be done, I know it's gonna be done right, it's by a contractor. I don't have an issue paying $25 as long as I can pay it on Monday. So yeah, my window's gonna be in and it's gonna be done and it's gonna be right, but I don't wanna have to worry about running over here if I wanna do something on a Saturday.
Well, who says it's
Okay.
only $25?
Or 50 or whatever.
My thing is
Are
that,
you saying you do think you should have a permit?
No,
or
I'm
you
saying
don't?
I see the benefit and I also see the pro and the con.
Okay.
The con is if I wanna do something on a Saturday and I wanna go
You don't
rip
wanna
out, and we had talked about doors very briefly. If you basically just take off your door and you put it back on the hinges and things like that, that to me is more of like a maintenance type thing and him.
If I could jump, that's not a zoning permit. We don't require anything for doors. So there's a different discussion that has to happen.
Yeah,
with
I'm
building.
jumping around.
Yeah, into building, which is totally separate of this discussion, so I don't wanna confuse you. So when we stick to decks and patios and these kind of things,
those are things that we have some say.
yeah, those are zoning items, and so,
So my point is I see the pro and con.
Okay.
I do. I see why I see the benefit of having it done. I see the non-benefit of us enforcing certain things because we should have, not having the right.
I wanna stay up, the reason that I'm opposed to the permitting, only to decide if it's in the right place, when we're talking about decks and patios, is that it puts us, in my opinion, in a position where we went out and said this is okay, and then it wasn't okay, and then we approved it,
what wasn't okay?
where it's at. Because how do you know, this is where you keep,
So if they put in the right, so let's talk about a deck for a minute, alright? So if the deck is put where it's supposed to be, we can measure from the side yard, okay, and say, hey, we know, based on your boundary survey here, your lot is this wide, we know off the house is this far. You can take basic measurements, right? These are basic measurements that anyone can take. And they need to understand that they can't put the deck around the side of the house so it's in a setback, right? That's part of the issue here. If they come to us and say, hey, I wanna do this, then we're gonna say, hey, you need a variance for that, right? So, especially if it's in a setback, they could do it with permission, and they gotta discuss it with, this commission, and then council's gotta approve it. So there's a process to that. Typically speaking, most people put their decks right behind, or their patios even, right behind the house, and usually it falls within all the setbacks, no problem. Once in a while, we run into some weird stuff. Side yards of corner lots, as we know from
and
fencing,
that's a great,
do run into problems, right?
and what we're doing here is creating work for the staff, that we're not making money off of this, and in a rare occasion, we may find an instance where we actually save somebody from putting it in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
It's the hassle for the resident and the staff, the time that it takes our staff to go look at every deck, patio, and fence that needs to be put up.
So as a public service, I will just tell you from experience, that the 1 or 2 times a year that you save somebody from making an error, that could be thousands of dollars, is well worth the investment. It is a service back to your citizenry as a whole, and that's kind of how I will just tell you from my side of that equation, right? That's why we do these things, that's why.
Well, it's a cost
that's how it
benefit
goes
thing.
through. It is, it is.
It's
Do
the
you wanna
cost
save-
of
do you-
having our staff look at all of these, the worth the benefit of catching
That's right.
1 in 10 years.
So,
No, it's not 1 in 10 years. It
Oh,
honestly is,
whatever
it
the
honestly is
number,
a
1 a
couple,
year.
it is honestly a couple every year that we catch in various form that we're able to save someone a significant amount of money. I mean, wherever that is, we're able to say, I can't put that there, you're gonna run into a
So
problem.
how do you go about preventing, that's what I'm trying to guess, so when you're going to look at a patio, you're gonna go out there before they pour it?
No, they bring in.
Is that what you're saying?
They bring in a drawing.
You catch it on the
Right.
drawing.
Yeah, we catch it on the drawing. We're able to say, sometimes
Right,
people
and
bring
that's
in
exactly the
something.
point, and
Sometimes
then
people bring
it's
in
not
something
until after
more
they
elaborate.
decide, oh, they approved that drawing, but we decided to do it
Then
different.
that's on them.
Right, that's what
They
I'm
do.
saying, this
They do.
permitting process
But
doesn't
No, it does
eliminate
work.
that.
In most cases, you're right, it does not eliminate the 1 or 2 bad apples that may still do what they want anyways.
Yeah, the
Right.
one that we asked for the
The one-
variance after he put the fence
Yeah,
up and,
that's right.
and then they
That-
still
Then
approved
we
it,
end
which
up just-
But
infuriated me.
in most cases, I will tell you, in the vast majority of cases, when someone brings something to us and we say, oh, when we catch something and say, don't do this because you're gonna be in the setbacks, that's not allowed, they're like, oh, we're sorry, then they typically adjust it. right? Because most
And
people
then
don't want
adjust
to
it
run
and
through
then
the
go
tunnel.
forward the way
No,
they want to.
that doesn't
It could
happen
very
most
well
times.
happen.
But yes, it
It's
very well
happened.
happen. We
It
know.
happened with the fence
Yeah,
right over
thank
here,
you.
whether it's
I-
a fence or a
I'm
path.
telling you from experience that most
Oh,
people
I-
don't change it and they don't go out and do it anyways.
Right, from
They
experience.
don't go out and do it anyways.
Which was the disappointing reason as to, and I'm bringing up the past, but that's the disappointing thing for me that happened, that basically everybody said that, not everybody, there was a couple, and we should have done a roll call, cause I don't think it would have flown, whatever. But the person that brought in the permit, or he came in, got a permit, didn't do what he said he was gonna do, supposedly. We went back out because the boards were on the wrong side.
Oh, the fence.
Yeah, the fence, he did it the way he wanted and admitted that
Yeah.
he did. And council basically said that it was, they approved it after the fact.
Yeah.
And it was disappointing.
That was
because,
council's prerogative.
and it was, and I was on council, I was a no,
I'd say
and Tony
all-
was a no. And I hate to say it, I think there was some other no's, but they didn't actually do a roll call and they just kind of moved on, but anyways. That was disappointing because it sets a bad example. They came in, they got a permit, they were supposed to do something, they went and did something that they weren't supposed to do and then applied for a variance. So, to go along with Tony, I mean, again, I
It
understand what
doesn't-
he's
this
saying, it
permitting
doesn't fix
process
everything.
doesn't Fix the things that you were worried about, that's why I don't think it's.
But it is, I mean, it's,
But
You're gonna have
maybe
people, no
the
matter
percentage
how-
of people that are doing that
you're not
are-
gonna stop that anyways,
Right,
yes.
No.
they're
they're
gonna
small.
do whatever they wanna do.
Mhm.
Maybe the percentage of people doing it correctly was higher.
It is.
It is.
And now
Quite
this might
frankly,
be
it is.
really a dumb question, or a
Dumb
dumb
questions.
idea, but if we decided not to permit, is it possible that a resident who maybe doesn't know what they're supposed to do could come in and get that information from
Yes.
Calvin, or
Absolutely.
without
If
it being an official
It's-
thing?
If the residents, if you chose not to get, first, I'll say, if you chose not to get rid of, if you chose to get rid of all the permitting, right, well, this certain group, right,
Yeah.
let's say you don't want decks, patios, fences, all right, let's say you get rid of those, fine. Now, in a couple cases, like with certain decks, depending on how they attach to the structure, and if they do certain things,
And square footage,
yeah, in square footage, they're required to get, inspected because it becomes a certain size, right? We see all the time in the news here and there where people have, too many people on a deck and it collapses, right? So that's the idea, that's a health and safety issue and why you inspect loads and make sure people build their things right, so you prevent injury down the road. There's a health and safety component to it. Our main concern, not only from the standpoint of setbacks, make sure people put it in the right place, is that we say, hey, by the way, you're beyond a certain point here, you gotta go see the building department, with what you're doing, right? We point them down to the next step in some of these cases, right? So, there's a public service on all points of this. Now, if you get rid of them, that's fine. I think what you run into is, over the course of time, you will see some unhappiness occur, right? And you may, and 10 years down the road, this group and the council may say, hey, we made an error, we gotta reinstitute some permitting, we've had too many problems. It's an experiment all around. I'm not gonna say it's not. It would be unusual, I'll tell you from the standpoint of municipalities, you would be very unusual in not requiring the permits for these stuff. But it's completely within the prerogative of the village to do so or not do
I
so.
don't know, I think it's a 50-50 thing when you talk to some do and some don't.
I can pull every single one here in Central Highlands surrounding areas and they all require permits for these things in front of you. All of them.
I guess I just don't see the side to doing it,
To doing the permits or not doing the permits?
doing the permits.
here's my view on doing the
Come in.
permits, I feel like if we're gonna do them, I mean, in this, and I hear both sides of it, but if we're gonna do them, it needs to be done right, because like she says, nobody really came out and checked the fence, nobody really came and did that kind of stuff, and I know that we've had, multiple different people and,
You don't have to have hole
Doesn't
inspectors,
matter.
that's an oddity of
right.
your code that's in there that survives.
I mean, I just feel like and here's
Yeah,
what
that was a Scott insistence
Yeah,
thing.
that was.
He was very particular about that.
Yeah, he loves his holes, that's fine.
Well, no, this went back, there was, even before we had a code about fences, Dick Busick was going out and inspecting post holes.
He loved doing that, by the way. He
I
loved
thought that
inspecting
came with Scott, I thought he was
No.
saying, let's do two,
Yeah, I mean, if I
Before,
recall,
and then
the date under that fence code has been around a while. I think
Yeah.
that's.
it goes back to who enforced it and who didn't.
Because you remember,
well, I think we have a big problem with enforcement. and the
Oh,
neighbor.
yeah.
Your
I
code,
know you don't think that, but.
well, I don't have a problem with
No,
that.
no,
I
it's
think
been
we do have a
ongoing,
problem.
because again, I actually know several places that, and one is where I believe the cut through would have been from Jordan Road to Wildwood. Somebody put an actual garage.
Oh, yeah, yeah, his garage.
That's
That
why
was
there
a
is
lot,
no, that is why there is no,
It's like that on Alder Vista.
Yeah, there's a
Alder
couple.
Vista? Yeah.
so, but again, I'm not, and I can't say that they didn't get a permit at the point, I mean, to be
The way
completely.
our records are kept.
Correct, so, and then I know somebody that has a shed that is technically on their neighbor's property, so,
Yeah.
I mean, it does happen, it happened, and again, maybe they had a permit, maybe they didn't, maybe it was done 5 years ago, maybe it was done, but whatever.
Well, I think Donna's is really, her shed's closer to the neighbors than it's supposed to be.
So,
Yeah, and that's been there
That's been,
for,
right, it's been
So
there
we
when
did-
you moved in.
yeah, oh, yeah,
so
and
if we
we're
can jump
taking
back
it down.
to the sheds, since we're
Yeah.
gonna segue back to the sheds, and back to a comment about 20 minutes ago concerning what sheds are appropriate, right? So, this is a very good discussion point, because if those of you who were here on the board recall, with the new development, and when Michael Braun was sitting here, and you guys put in several things, you did put in new code in the development text concerning sheds over there, that they had to match the facades and match the materials of
That was
those.
for here too.
Yeah, so that's in the development text for over here, where there are controls for how the shed's aesthetic qualities are over here. The intent.
That will change though, won't it?
No.
Even when we, are those codes in the development text
Yes.
still gonna apply
Yes,
after?
yes. Those take precedent over any code that, for that text, take precedent over the code that you write here. So if something is stricter over there, it takes precedent over your general code.
Will it stay like that forever, or
But you
will
have to
it?
change the development text over there to change it. It doesn't have to stay like that forever, it's not written in stone.
Oh, but we can, as long as we change the development text.
Absolutely,
Oh.
absolutely.
Okay.
But you have to keep in mind, so the idea though was, at the time, that eventually something would be adopted for sheds over here as well too, so that there would be the same code in the books, and so you would at that time control for the aesthetic quality. So in essence, unless you have a metal house, you would not be allowed to have a metal shed, or, those sheds came down, because obviously the ones that exist would be, would be allowed to continue until such time that they fell into disrepair or were replaced.
So you're saying we don't have to specify that?
You do,
Okay.
you do.
Or we could.
You could.
Well,
Yeah,
if you wanted to know
that's right,
about
you
sheds.
could.
yeah.
If you want to control for aesthetic qualities of the sheds, as it was discussed here 20 minutes ago, you can, but you have to put it into the, into the code and do so.
So basically, MPCA's shed could be, at this point in time, could be whatever you guys want it to be, because there's no rules that state that it needs to be
Right,
wood,
exactly.
plastic, metal,
Oh, they're not.
twigs.
They're doing the Cadillac of sheds.
There you go.
Well, I don't know if they are,
That we
but
would.
I think that's where they were.
There you go.
What?
I said twigs.
It just looks like twigs, but it's wood.
Yeah, that's wood.
I think Danny at some point mentioned doing one from Costco, I think it was plastic.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm. And I think the only
Options,
But I
thing.
think she
Right.
just didn't give a crap, she just wanted something
Right,
else.
and I think the only thing to remember when you start telling people what types of materials is you do have to make it somewhat affordable for people or have
That's right.
options for people, because again, we do have houses that don't have garages
Yes.
that potentially do need sheds,
Yep.
and they can only, maybe they can only afford what they can afford. So do you want their lawnmower sitting out, or do you want it in at least some sort of shed? So,
But
or trash
the
cans,
shed
or,
And the lawnmower in it,
there you go.
that's what I say.
Well, and that's what I say, but not everybody can afford it. I mean, I'm gonna be there, I've gone through rough times to where if I had a code enforcement guy that would've came to my house not 5 years ago, but 10 years ago and said, you have to do this, I would've looked at him and like, that's fine if you're paying for it. So, I mean, I'm not gonna say, I'm not there now, but I know that there's probably residents that live here that don't necessarily have, if,
The cost is an issue.
yeah, the cost could be an issue. I mean, and that's, and not everybody wants to live, most people I think do want to have something nice and something, and that's why we do have some some things for hardships, and, like even the grass cutting thing, I always like to make sure that one of the things that this summer, if we have somebody that's got a hardship, a legit hardship, I would be more than happy to go cut their grass before they get fined. I'm gonna be real, because it's something that I know it exists. I'm not gonna say I've never been in that position, but people that just don't, that are lazy, that just don't wanna do it. There are two sides to it, so I'm not in disagreement. I mean, as far as, you know, making
Well,
sure
and-
that they're in line with,
But it also,
They
the
can't
other,
be
it's
trashed.
not just sheds too, because we also have to consider like playhouses.
correct,
That's another thing
Mm-hmm.
that falls under this category of
Accessory
accessory structure.
Absolutely. It is
So-
also not defined clearly. in the
It's
code.
not, and there, we had an issue with the Playhouse over on Briar Rose or whatever. You know, that I think they took it from another house and brought it over. you
Or
know.
5 houses maybe. Is that the one that was sort of put together?
Yeah,
Kinda
yeah.
funky. It was
hodgepodge.
kind of funky. Depending on how you looked at it.
Yeah, I think from, if I remember correctly, when, the last time we were looking at, sheds, I think we chose not to include specific materials for it, just because of the cost factor. But if I remember correctly, we wanted to make sure that there was a solid floor. Like, it just couldn't be on dirt, and I
Right.
think that's the only specification that
See, but
we
there's,
were.
and you've been researching sheds lately, and there are systems that don't require floors, aren't there?
The tough sheds, they say
Right. Yeah,
you
so you
don't
don't
need
need
a,
a floor.
well,
Yeah.
so that's a point. I mean, this guy, talking to this guy, the MPCA wanted to do concrete, they were determined to do concrete, and the tough shed guy said, you don't need it. It's is it galvanized steel, it's dipped in
Oh,
zinc or something like that, and it's good
it's
for
resistant,
years.
yep.
So, what do you do with that then?
Yeah, yeah.
well, and the cost of concrete, even just for a slab, is
I
not
know,
inexpensive.
When I had a shed years ago, it didn't have a floor in it, I just put it on the ground. You know,
Piece of
just for the
plywood.
lawnmower, I didn't do anything.
I've
You
seen
know,
plenty
just-
with just a piece of plywood in the bottom.
I think that's the one, what the one at the pool had was plywood. It was raised, yeah, cause the floor kind of fell in, but
I can't tell you how many,
Well,
These are the kind of things that we need to
but it was
consider.
there.
right, well, and when you go, I can't tell you how many houses that we've sold that one of the big, no-nos when you have an FHA inspector come out is sheds. And when they have plywood on it and it's rotted halfway
I
up
like that, yeah.
and peeling paint and all that kind of stuff, I mean, it's a huge no-no. So, I mean, there's,
Yeah, they're big on the
Meaning they won't-
exterior
Mhm.
maintenance.
You
yes,
want mortgage for that?
oh, you
No,
won't,
yeah, no,
Yeah, you have
correct
to, any exterior
Yeah.
issues, you have to have
you have to
corrected.
fix.
under certain loan programs, yeah.
I can't tell you how many sheds we've had issues with stuff like that. So the plastic ones are nice, you don't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
So, okay,
So,
the only other one, and I think we're probably getting late, the only other one, cause I think everybody just needs to kind of go and look and see what they wanna do with all of these too, but home occupation permit is, the only reason I wanna hit this one is for everybody to really think about without going crazy, only because I've been dealing with it in here. And again, it's just one of those,
Our
Stick it where it
code is
fits. I mean, it's-
woefully inadequate.
yeah, I mean, so we had someone that we sent a letter to, I'm not gonna go crazy in detail, but we had one person that we sent a letter to, and of course, you know, they were all upset about it, and, you know, call an attorney and all this kind of stuff. It's my understanding, no, and within an hour of getting the letter, I mean, it was just crazy. So they were all upset because, you know, I think they thought we were just gonna like try to shut down their business, and
You were telling them they needed a permit. for
yes,
home
they,
occupation.
okay, so when you pull up Google, you know, one of the ways that he's been finding a couple different things, and Google is not always right, because I had somebody else get a letter, and they absolutely are not running that business, and then I realized who it was, and I'm like, you know, they're not running that business. So anyways, Google's not always right, but somebody's probably used their address as something or whatever, and Google's managed to think that that's a business. But anyway, so Google's not perfect. This particular person was, you know, very upset and da-da-da-da-da, and they've been doing this for years, but it came up on the map. So he sent him a letter, and in my opinion, and Eric, this is gonna be for you, in my opinion, it's more for us to know kind of what's going on. A very small amount of money for, you know, let's just assume they have a certain business, and all of a sudden we have all of these cars parking out of there, and we start getting complaints from residents, and now we're sitting here going, what's going on? We would know what's going on because they had a permit. That being said, what this particular person's doing, is it any of our business what they're doing? No, they're not causing any problems, they're not doing anything, it's been operating for years and we had no idea. So, and again, it's not anything, you know, let's just assume it's a, I don't wanna say it cause we're on the
Well,
recorder
thing
right now,
about
but.
our code right now, it calls out for, well, it doesn't really say what a home occupation is as a
It's
list.
very
If you-
limited.
a few different things.
It is
But the one thing it does say in there is that it is not meant to keep someone from having a professional office at their house.
Right.
You know, so, you know, this guy over here has a construction business or remodeling business or
Right.
something. He's using his house.
This isn't the one I was talking about, this is another one.
This is one that's
Oh, I got 3 of them
happened
then.
years ago. I mean, that, you know, he has a business, but it's, you know, it's a construction business. He's not doing anything at his house that is a business. You know, these home occupations are geared around doing something at your house, like if you're baking, like, Pam's sewing quilts. You know, if Pam's sewing quilts and selling them, she's doing it at her house and people are coming there, they need to get a permit for that. But when you're just having your office, your business address is from your house. But that's the only thing that you're doing is, you know, getting mail and FedEx things, you know, that, like every other person does. Does that mean that because your address is your, or your home is your business address?
Okay, so if you say, I think that makes sense to a point. If you do that, are they not, if you say, okay, your office is there, whatever, does that mean they're not paying taxes?
So
Or how do you
There's a
control
couple
that?
intents here.
Well,
So
that's
let me
another
jump in-
issue there.
Yeah, let me jump in on the intents and why this, no matter how you define home occupation, no matter what uses are okay to the community, there are 2 intents behind why home occupation code is allowed within a residential district. The first one is the business type and use, right? So the residential district is not meant to be a high activity or high traffic generating area. It's meant to be used for, again, back to the quiet enjoyment of the residents, okay? If I have someone that is, and you know, I've been through this in multiple jurisdictions, so in Obetz I had a guy, he was, the second point of having it, by the way, is for taxes, for revenue streams, right? But we'll get to that one, there's 2 points, one is quiet enjoyment within the zoning, one is for knowing who's doing what for tax revenue stream, okay? Both are important, all right, so in Obetz, I had a gentleman who, he had a very successful landscaping company, all right? He was able to get his trucks, his trailers and everything onto his driveway and into his garage, amazing. And he ran his business out of his house, right? It was his registered LLC business, okay? He paid his taxes, just fine. Okay. The problem was, for a while, until we put the kibosh on it, he'd have all his employees would suddenly be showing up and parking on the street, all right? So that was a no, we had a discussion about that. So then the next thing that happened was the employees were parking somewhere else, and they were all wandering in, right? And then they're sitting in the lawn in the morning waiting for him to get the vehicles and drive off. So we said, listen, you know, this is the problem. You can't, this type of activity is exactly what is not allowed within the residential district, right? If you wanna have your employees gather, you know, 1 or 2 guys come into the house, you know,
It's not noticeable.
okay, right? Nobody's gonna care. If they wanna come, stop in, pick up the vehicles, maybe they park their vehicles on the driveway, and off they go, right? And then they pick up all those guys somewhere else, right? There's a pickup spot outside of the zone. That's one example, right? Another one is, like Tony was saying, if I've got quilts, if I've got people coming to the house, it's to control the traffic, right? A piano teacher's okay, a chiropractor out of his house is probably okay, right? Because you're not having 20 people like at a retail thing or at this landscaping company coming and parking all over the street, right? It's one reason, by the way, people in some communities control for garage sale permits, because they're doing it every weekend, they're parking all over the street. It's taking away from the quiet enjoyment, just as an aside. That's a business they're running out of the house, selling things, whether they're getting it on eBay or whatever, they're having a lot of traffic. So traffic generation is an issue and should be considered in these cases, right? The other side of it, getting to the tax discussion, is that, yes, people can have a home office, right? But when I have a business I run out of my house, an LLC, and I am doing my work, and I do this out of my house, I'm registered back to my LLC is registered back to my establishment, I pay New Albany taxes, right? This is the same issue, but that's a home occupation, okay? Because I'm claiming part of my house from a tax standpoint, I'm paying my local taxes, right? So there are people that can, you know, you have to be careful on the home office thing. It's one thing I have a home office where maybe I've got a full-time job in downtown Columbus, and I work from home a little bit. That is not the same thing, right? That's a home office that I work for another business, that maybe 2 days out of the week I'm working from home or doing some of my work there. But if I'm running my LLC or whatever it is, or my S corp order out of my house, that should be covered under a home occupation permitting process, because you as the municipality need to know that, because that person could be making significant dollars.
Well, but
And you wanna have it paid. I'm just giving you the
I would
arguments.
say that the
Just
person
giving you
has
the
to pay their
arguments.
taxes, whether they're running a business or not out of their
So-
house.
So people have.
You have to pay
How
your
many
taxes.
people
So-
are not
so-
paying rate of taxes?
So hold up, I don't wanna get into
Little
this side, hold up.
I mean,
Let me finish. So, the point here is that it's a control thing from the standpoint of municipality, both the control for the use as well as the tax revenue, right? You can view it however you want, this is typically how it's done. Should they be paying their taxes just on the honor system? Yes. Do they all? No. I may claim I work out of a different location in order to avoid multiple tax bills, right? People don't like to avoid those RETA taxes, they really do. So I'm just telling you, those are the reasons. You guys can make a decision
Well,
as we
but-
go through the home occupation, how you wanna handle it.
The
and who you wanna
tax
clarify.
reason- it doesn't make sense.
Sure it does.
No, it doesn't, because you have to pay your taxes. The only thing that they're doing is maybe avoiding paying taxes in Columbus. It's to say they actually work in Columbus, but they're saying that, so we will get our taxes from, or should,
You say that.
we should, well,
You
but this,
should.
the home occupation thing doesn't make us any easier to enforce collecting the taxes from that
It
person.
makes you know where the business is and then.
It doesn't
keep
matter
track.
where your business is at, you owe us your taxes.
It does
If you
matter.
Where I
live
don't
here.
disagree, if they write it all off, there's nothing you can do. I mean, it's still an
As long as you
honor
do
system and people, yes.
No, those are the
it's-
reasons, those
yeah.
are the two intents of why. home
Like, I
occupation
totally
is-
understand the intent, but if they're gonna be, I'm gonna go with fraudulent, they're gonna be fraudulent. I mean,
Right.
you
If
know,
they're not gonna pay,
if they're
they're not
making
gonna pay.
$1,000 a month cutting hair out of their house, for example, you know, my son goes to somebody's house every other time, we go to Penzones, and then the other times we go to her house, I'm not joking. So, and I pay her, and I'm just gonna assume she probably doesn't claim all of that at her house, I'm just gonna,
or
and maybe she does, I don't know.
There's a stage.
Whether
There's a
she does or
stage
doesn't,
where-
whether she cuts her hair at Penzones or at her house, she still owes the same amount of money.
No, not if she's, well, the point is if she's
She earned
writing
it,
it.
she earned the money there, or she earns it in her house.
But
she's
not
still earning it.
everybody will say that they earned the money,
Well, I
or they'll
know.
say,
I
that's all my
understand
point
that.
was.
I'm saying it
does
doesn't-
it give you a heads up to somebody
Yes.
who's got an occupation? I mean, they could just not tell you and not apply for a
right.
permit.
That's right, and you catch them in other ways.
Well, we've caught them, Google's been the way that we've caught them, and I don't wanna say caught them, but we have one right now that's parking 3, and I'm gonna hit this one because I just think it's nice for the topic. So, one of the ones has got 3 large vans that are being parked, one in the driveway, 2 in the street, we talked about this. One in the driveway, 2 in the street, and basically our code doesn't appear to be strong enough to do anything about it, because I don't know that there's any, yes, he's running a home occupation, yes, he's parking these on the street, but in the same sense, I don't think our code, it's my understanding that our code is potentially not going
It's not so much
to.
our code, is you can't stop people from parking on the street, on a public street.
Well, it has to do with, he's running the business out of the house, but yes, we can't stop him from, you're right, I mean, cause that was the answer at the end of the day. Cause I'd talked to him about why, so we'd already sent letters and this and that, and it doesn't sound like there's anything we can do, but, you know, in my view, is it right or is it wrong that he's doing it? It's difficult to get through there, but,
Yeah.
like Tony's saying, it doesn't stop him from going and having 3 kids and buying them all full-size vans.
That's correct.
So you have to look at it that way. I mean, if he's got 3 kids and they all have,
Well, and the thing that I'm wondering, I think I went by the house, are we talking about just dually pickups?
oh, no,
Because
they
there's
are
a-
full-size white, the
I didn't see
typical
'em.
full-size white
Are
vans.
they parked like this, kind of a little cutout and parked like this? This is on Maplewood.
Yes.
I went by that the other day and thought, it's sort of like they're parked doubly parked
I believe that's
next to each
exactly.
other, and I thought.
I don't
wonder
think
if
we can,
that's-
so again, it boils back down to, do we want, but anyways, the whole point was,
But
like,
they're work vehicles, that's the difference between your kids' cars and work vehicles.
So,
I mean, it's not really any difference
so there
visually,
are things you can do.
but
You know, first of all, there are ways to handle it, and it does get extreme, is the right word I'll use. If you have someone who is, because you can park vehicles on the street up to a certain point.
Right.
You can adjust your codes to, reflect weight, and you can be restrictive in different ways about how you handle it within the residential district. There are ways to do it. The big one, if you have a flouter who's definitely got home occupation, and he's bringing a lot of vehicles, and they're definitely not kids. I've seen it done, and it's an extreme example. The council passes no parking right in front of the house and stuff, and makes it more difficult on the individual to park it right in front of the house. You can do that, right? So there's ways to handle it.
Well,
I'm just saying that, I've seen it done.
Right.
If, I've seen it, if somebody really flaunts it for years, and the council finally gets furious
Just
with
make
them,
nobody parking on that
nobody's
street.
parking right there, yeah, so out you go, that's how
Are
we
you
handle
talking
it.
in a specific plate?
Oh, yeah,
Okay, really?
yeah.
We actually did that around
Oh,
the
yeah.
curve
You
over
can-
there
You
that,
can absolutely, the council has
You're
full
targeting
authority.
that person.
Absolutely,
And
but
that's okay.
yes, it is, because you can.
Well, I've got,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
Well,
up to the council, and like
I
I
know
said,
what
it's
she's
an
thinking.
extreme example, and I
well,
won't
that was
name
my
the
point to the
municipalities
other
that
part.
have done it, but I
You
have
can't
seen
stop
it
11
done.
people from living in a house
With pro-
and
in one
having
case,
11
it
different cars
was,
along the street.
it was a
It's
problematic
unfortunate, but
family as a
Can we?
whole, and they were,
Yeah, it's
they were in and out of jail,
Yes, you
and
can.
known problems with
A
the
lot of
police, and
places
there were drugs
have,
flowing in and out of the house, so what they did,
like a,
is they just made it a
Max.
complete no parking zone
Yeah,
around the
house
house on the
sharing,
corner, and
like,
that fixed that problem for a while, right?
it's
And-
kind
and
of
it
under
can
the
be done.
same
Extreme,
terms of Airbnb.
Extreme measures.
It's not like
Yeah.
controlling
Control.
other people that live there
so
other
how can
than,
they not
you know, the owner of the house.
legally do
So
something
that's-
about that?
What do you mean?
The people that they're,
I
It's,
think,
I'm
it's a
calling it
public
parking.
street, it's a public street, they have access to their driveway,
right,
right? So the homeowner, so in this particular extreme example, it was an elderly couple in a wheelchair who were being taken advantage of by other family members in and out of the house, right? Who were dealing drugs out of the house, and so they didn't, there were multiple people in trouble in this, and they were in and out of jail, people kept abusing the elderly couple, and so what they ended up doing was, the elderly couple had room to park in their driveway, to keep the traffic flow in this particular example down, they no-parked this whole section around it. So you couldn't park on the public street, and that's the right of the municipality to regulate its right of way, right? So there's nothing you can do, it's not, it may seem discriminatory, it may be discriminatory, but the fact is they didn't block off their driveway, right? They have the right to park.
we don't let people
Single
park
family
on
house.
certain sides of the roads, and I
That's
know
right.
that there was a curve
Yep.
that we stopped at, and we actually had a situation down there that we were asked whether or not, because somebody was disappointed that they were parking. I believe the people from the apartment complex is parking on Minerva Lake Road.
Yeah.
So there was somebody that asked if we could prevent that so we could put a no parking, because when you're coming up, and I'm not gonna say it's not, when you're coming up Minerva Lake Road to Westerville Road, you have those 4 or 5 cars that are sitting there at the school bus stop, you know, there's the bus stop and everything right there, so you got buses on this side, you got cars, you got all that stuff, so
so how is that any different than in front of my house?
we didn't do it.
Not to be so,
No,
okay,
we didn't
okay.
do it, so absolutely, it's not any different.
Yeah.
But could we have?
Yes.
I'm just telling you, could we
Yes,
have?
yes.
Yeah, I mean, as a council, we could do the same thing. You could, you know, but would you have to deal with it, the screaming and all of that? So we were talking about something that goes a little bit along that and not along that, but, you know, renting rooms out of a house was one of the other situations that we had talked about. When it becomes excessive, and can you control it, can you not control it? I'm not saying and I think just the only reason that I think we really wanted to talk about this is for people to decide, and I think that's what everybody does, what do we want to do? So we had sent a letter to somebody, again, that was advertising rooms for rent, and they had rearranged their home, and I'm gonna only tell you what I'm aware of, or what I've been told. They rearranged rooms in their home to rent rooms out, and they've been doing it for years. And we had sent a thing for them to do a home occupation, and to say this, I don't know that we have any right to do that, I don't know the outcome, I don't really, you know, it's, the whole purpose of it in my mind was, again, just so if there becomes excessive cars, if there becomes excessive, you know, people speeding up and down the street and this and that, you kind of know what's going on.
But by doing that, my understanding is we're a single family neighborhood.
Yeah.
By doing that, do you have multiple families? You're sort of supporting that they're doing something that
So-
really shouldn't be being
I'm not
done.
disagreeing, I brought it up, I mean, it was one of the ones that I had brought up, we sent a letter, she sent 2 responses, certified letters back instead of just paying the $25. Not saying it was right or wrong, but it goes back to our code that we don't know, it's a gray area is a fair way to say it, whether or not we can, because we don't have anything, in my opinion, and we had talked about Airbnb.
I was told that legally you can't define family, that's what we got.
It is true,
So all
that there
those
is
people can
some,
be
there is some,
family.
you have to be, this is a very hairy issue, to put it mildly. It's controversial, when we talk about controversial issues, and it's very time consuming to stake out any particular property to go through this. Now, the way that you handle, everyone has highest and best uses within a district, right? The highest and best use here could either be you as a single family homeowner, or I need to rent my house out. You can't economically restrict it from the public side that people can't get their highest and best use, right? Now the question is, where we get into the gray area is the Airbnb use okay? I mean, I would argue that if this house has been cut up, right, and where I've got demarcating walls between units,
It's an apartment complex.
it is an apartment complex, it's I would say that's a family unit, which is not allowed in the zone. That's the first thing I would go after, in my opinion. However, if it's not cut up and I've just got rooms that people are coming in staying at, and, right, that's a different issue.
Would cut up, and this is just a question, would you consider it a multi-family home if we had multiple kitchens or multiple?
I think yes, okay, let me step back. I think if you've got multiple entrances
Okay,
and separation within the structure.
let's say there's not multiple
between
entrances,
units.
but multiple,
So like
living
an entrance,
areas.
and then I break it out, let's say I have a common entrance,
okay,
and then I have separate
Apartment
areas
rooms.
that are no longer, yeah, you no longer can walk between the house without running into a locked door, right? That then someone else has separated themselves in. Like in our houses, you walk in the main door and you have access to the rest of the house. Kitchen, living room, rooms upstairs, maybe a basement, okay. It's free flowing, right? But if I get into a situation where someone has redone the inside of the room, first of all, we get back to building permits, they have to get, that requires multiple building permits to be able to do that, and it's not allowed by our zoning. That is a strict problem, right?
Right.
Okay, now, if I have an open air area, right, even if I have multiple kitchens, right, it's okay, because people have wet bars, they have kitchens, they
Okay.
can have multiple areas, but I have not cut up the house, I have not separated units out, right? That's probably okay, quite frankly, right, because I can do that in my open house, it's still a single family.
Lots of people have houses with two
Exactly.
kitchens, though.
Exactly, so,
So you
that's,
could have 10 people living in your house as long as you haven't, 10 different people who aren't, I'm gonna say
Potentially.
related, as long as you don't have separate
this is a difficult, I would simply say this is a difficult
living
issue
spaces.
to
I
solve.
don't know that that you can put a limit on the number of people.
It has been tried, and it's hard. It's hard because, one, we've got to prove stuff, right? And it gets very difficult to say who's not related to who, especially in today's world, and what relationship I have, right? I mean, I could have a different kid staying with my kid, right? Maybe I'm taking care of my neighbor's kid because he's a jerk, right? And that kid's coming over to stay at my house. That's not my family member, but I'm caring for another child with permission, right? I don't know. It's very hairy to investigate that side of it. It's easier if they've done what you're talking about, which is if they actually have separate units. It's very clear cut that she's got, in this case,
and I don't know, I
Yeah,
haven't,
exactly.
so I guess the question would be,
here's how we would
yeah,
handle that. So if you suspect that, we don't have the authority to enter the premises. However, if we think that's going on, we get into multiple code-related issues that are building and fire code items, right?
right,
People have authority, or our building department, who can go in and say, hey, I need to see this, and they're the ones that have the authority in the court action that can make that happen, right? And she can send all the certified letters she wants, they can,
and I think, and again, at the end of the day, this was just to have her register, just so we kinda knew that, yes, this is what they're doing, da-da-da. Like, again, we weren't really trying to shut it down, we weren't whatever, and this wasn't the first letter that she had received, she'd received letters in the past. In 2017, I believe because again, it's common knowledge, I mean,
Yeah.
they're definitely, I couldn't figure out who was speeding up and down our street until until somebody told me.
does she just rent to, tell me-
College students,
Yeah, so she has physical rentals going on, which if she hasn't, again, a multi-unit in her house is probably okay, right? But even though we may not like it, it's probably the highest and best use, and she's okay doing what she's doing. However, if she's in an Airbnb situation, that's different. You can legislate that the rental has to be on a particular term, right? You can't have daily rentals, because that becomes a hotel. You can define it as such, that hotel usage is not allowed, right? Monthly rentals though are different. If it's on a monthly rental, it's probably okay.
And I think, you know, and the issue with the Airbnb is you just don't know what you're gonna end up having from day to day. I mean, could you imagine living next to an
It
Airbnb?
becomes a nuisance issue potentially if there's a party.
Like, to me, it's the weirdest thing in the world to think that I would ever rent out a room of my house, let alone my entire house on a daily even if I didn't live there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people do it at Muirfield, they've done it for years, it's, you know, when the
Makes good
golf,
money.
oh yeah, they do.
So
Um,
are you wanting us to think about this, consider this, or what?
No, yeah, I think home occupation, do you want people to register in general? Do you want to eliminate certain businesses?
What
Are we allowed
uses?
to eliminate
What
what
type?
uses?
Yes.
Are you allowed to have a massage therapist in the park, you know, a legit whatever? Are you allowed, or do you want people to be able to, you know, babysitting and, you know,
Yeah.
I guess
You can-
accountants?
You may wanna get, you know, you can get real generalized. Keep in mind that if you go the route of saying, and this is an extreme example, if you said, all home occupations are okay, well, by the way, you can just do what you want. That extreme example in which you have no control becomes that you're even more open than your commercial industrial zones. You have to be very, very careful with that because that affects the primary issue, which is the quiet enjoyment of a residential zone. So you wanna take careful view of
No, wait,
what
wait, wait.
uses and what,
We're talking home occupation, so
Yes.
you're saying it would,
let's
it would
say,
parallel
there could be language, I can see an example where you could say, you know what, we're gonna just let people do what they wanna do, right? That's an extreme example. But what you get into there is you get into no control and you get into things that, you know, get extreme. So, and you become less controllable than your commercial zoning, so why even have a residential zone in the first place? So just be cognizant of how you wanna proceed and, you know, if you want to maintain the residential zone as a form of quiet enjoyment for the neighborhood as a whole with low usage and nuisance, or, you know, look at what uses may be okay. Piano features might be okay. Landscaping company from an administrative office, probably okay, right? As long as he doesn't bring, like we said, the extreme example of all the employees to it, you know? Insurance guys, okay, probably. Yeah.
So this is just a question, can you make it specific in the home
Yes.
occupation? Oh, you're about to hear it, so as a landscape architect, or a landscape like Josh, so you're allowed to have one vehicle, one commercial
Yes.
vehicle, or one, you know, whatever, or two, or whatever it becomes,
Absolutely.
to where you wouldn't have, I mean, again, 3 may not be that big of a deal, but what if in 2 months this guy comes home with a 4th vehicle and a 5th? Now, they're clearly not parking just in front of their house because they're not gonna, so now that's affecting the neighbors.
Yeah.
So at this point, it may not be affecting the neighbors, but let's just, you know, assume later on, but then I go back to the same question. Is it any of your business? I don't live over there, so do I really care? I'm not saying that I don't, I'm just, do you want to do that? Do you want to make it difficult for people to run a landscaping business or a roofing business or whatever out of their house? I mean, in my opinion, I have no problem with Josh having his truck there in his driveway. But if Josh was parking 7 trailers down Minerva Lake Road, I don't know that we have a code to stop him.
We do, there are ways to do it.
Okay.
There are ways to do that.
And I'm not
If
trying to
it
pick on
gets
him, I just know his
extreme.
name.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think he's great, so.
So there are ways to handle the extreme cases, whether injunctions in court, there's nuisance regs.
Okay.
If someone gets to that crazy level of annoyance, trust me, you can counsel.
There's something.
Yeah, ability to bring the pain, so to speak, if somebody's not conforming to what your intent is of the code. Most people, I mean, again, if people run admin offices out of their house,
Right.
and they got a couple employees coming, usually municipalities view this as a plus, right? It's okay, there's potentially net profits generated, there's employees, it just depends, you know, people can even have 3 employees in some cases come to the home if it's a certain, you know, sector of the economy. You know, I've seen it where one person had a big house and their whole basement was converted to office, they had 3 employees come every day, they were able to put people in the driveway, they weren't parking on the street, and they're very quiet, and that's it. They had employees come and the employees leave. And that was fine under this particular municipality's code.
that's one of the things too, I don't know what the situation is that you were talking about with the vans, but if there's driveway space, and you say they must, I mean, we've got a driveway that's got no cars in it, and there are all kinds of cars on the street. So can you say, like the vans, they're in the street, if they're bothering people, can you say, those vans need to be parked in the driveway or the garage?
Yes, you can. There are ways to, I believe, to do that. We will have to get a little research and a little creativity, but I believe that in the language, there's a way to handle that from an enforcement standpoint. And it might be, in that particular case, the police have to be involved too, right? Because the zoning covers the whole district, including the public right of way, but there'll have to be something instituted into police code to assist with that, I think. So again, that's something we'll have to clear. But I believe, rather than getting extreme and putting no parking signs in front of someone's house, but I think there's a way to get conformance, right? If you have driveway space, you must use it, right? That's a requirement. That's what it is.
So I think the biggest thing here is just trying to figure out, is there any businesses that you absolutely don't want in the village, and can we control it? I mean, is there anything that you can think of that you wouldn't want to protect yourself, to protect whatever? Just imagine if somebody next door was doing this in their house, would you have an issue with it? Whether it's a tax accountant, I mean, I know what my accountant's house looks like. I mean, she's got 5 cars in the driveway, 5 cars in the street. I mean, because she is so busy,
Certain
it
times
is.
of the year.
Oh, but it's 3 months out of the year, and
Yeah.
her neighbors don't care. She warns them. She takes them all, nice stuff, and but that's just the way that it is. Yeah, she does her taxes for free. But again, they aren't on roads that are like this.
Yep.
So it's not an inconvenience where she's at. But I think that's just for myself. Do you want to try to control Airbnbs? Because I know it is something that's up and coming and people do it. Maybe we don't want to. Do we want to 5 years from now? I mean, it's not, I guess my point is, it's not an issue now. And if there are some, we don't know.
Right.
But if it became an issue, would we want to enforce it? As of right now, Calvin couldn't enforce it unless it was for like a nuisance type, their loud music in the middle of the night, whatever. That's the only thing that we could do with that. And again, is that all we want to do? Is it again, he talks about the best uses for the house. You know what? If they don't want to sell their house and they want to rent it, where are we to control whether they rent it by the day or the month or the year? I don't know. So I don't have an answer. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
what do we want to do? So I don't know what you guys want to do. Do you want to let people rent their house basically by the day? I don't know. And do we want to enforce it or leave it alone?
I mean, my question would be, are we allowed to stop someone from renting out a room? That's the thing that
The way it gets worked, you cannot stop someone from renting a room, but there's terminology.
Airbnb is a business,
Yeah,
in my
Airbnb is a
opinion.
hotel.
Is a hotel.
Right.
That's where the
So
definition
you
gets
could
in, right? So you would
Say
say,
no Airbnb.
yeah, you would say the Airbnb, you would define it as the daily rental
No.
essentially becomes a hotel room, which is not the intent of the single-family residential district. Should you rent by month? Yeah, that's typically the smallest increment of time, of rental, right? And so that's how it's handled. Most people rent for a year, they go month to month, right?
There's a lease of
Yeah.
X amount of whatever.
Exactly.
I mean, I understand Airbnb probably has a lease or an agreement or
It
a
is,
contract or
absolutely.
something, but I don't.
Same thing that you do when you sign your hotel papers.
Right.
That's the issue there. So you can certainly say, this is a hotel use, it does not belong in this, thing, but you have to define it, right?
Right.
It doesn't belong here. So, but at the same time, you don't have to do anything.
And I
You can say it's
don't,
fine.
again, I don't know that anybody wants to, and I don't know if anybody has any other things that we haven't necessarily thought about. I mean, I think if we're gonna I don't wanna say destroy, fix these codes, I think they need to be fixed
Yep.
with the future in mind too. So I don't know what the answer is, and that's where, like I said, I want everybody's input to know, cause I don't wanna be the one to make those decisions. I want to be able to say, P and Z helped with this and so did council, and it's not my fault, so.
I think the easiest ones to fix, if you guys just wanna read through them, and it's more of a decision, yes, we think we need them, no, we don't think we need them.
Right.
I think, obviously, primary structures or structures of any type, right? Accessory structures, primary structures, addition remodelings, decks, patio, fences. Do any of these need driveways too? Do any of these need permits? Do you think there's value in that? If you think there is, that quite frankly is an easy language fix. We simply get rid of the stuff in 14, we clear it up and put it into the zoning, we say thou shalt get a permit, end of story, right? That's very easy to do. The complicated ones include home occupation, swimming pools are complicated, okay? Those two are gonna take some time. So, storage building sheds, another one that is easy, but you have to if you want that done, that one we're gonna put several definitions in place, right? As Tony pointed out, we're gonna have to have something for playsets, that is an accessory structure. Where is that appropriate? Sheds. there's several different interpretations of setbacks. So is the one with smaller setbacks okay? Is the one with bigger setbacks okay? Right? And we would have to define sheds out from your normal accessory structures, which are, say, a garage, right? Something of large size. So those are the things that kind of need to be looked at. But maybe by next time, if you guys can have maybe there's time after the variance to have a little more of a discussion on these, what I consider simpler ones, yay, nay, deck yes, patio no, as an example. We can then move forward to make recommendations and change code. So,
Going back to the variance,
yes.
that's gonna be to explain to all of them, we're gonna get it a day or so in advance,
Oh,
yes?
you'll get it, yes, you'll get it,
Okay.
several days, we'll give it to you at least, I would say 5 days in advance.
Cause I'll get it, I'll
Five.
review it with you and just give you my opinion and you can give them my opinion,
Yep, that's fine,
cause I won't be here the 18th.
be happy to do that.
I have a
Obligation.
bowling banquet if anybody was, it's a
That
Harry
actually might be
Buffalo.
more fun.
It's at Harry Buffalo.
It will be more
It will be more fun.
Perfect.
More fun.
It will be, actually, yeah, it's actually a really good time, so,
Well, enjoy your bowling banquet.
yes,
We'll be doing a variance.
yes.
You know, if I could ask you two, Lisa and Donna, to take a look at this 1442 that Eric has spelled out as a place where it says we need to get permits. It isn't. And if you look at 127205, that's where it describes that you need to get a permit for a shed. It spells it out in the code.
So we need to go and either adjust the 127205 or add additional in there to
Well,
address the rest of
One
them.
of the first problem with accessory structures is that there's
Definition?
two different, there's accessory structure under 200 square feet and over 200 square feet.
Correct.
One that's over 200 square feet needs to get a building permit.
Correct.
And that stuff is called out for in the state residential
Right.
building code. It's not in our code.
So with that, they come in here, they get a permit, and then they send them to Franklin County.
So
What happens, and you know, this is a whole nother issue, and I talked to Blended Township about our building, commercial building.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother issue we're not even gonna get into right now. But the way it works is that when someone wants to build a house or remodel a house, and it's a big project, they have to come into us to get zoning approval. Then, once we give them zoning approval, it gets taken to Franklin County to do a building permit.
correct.
But that's not,
If checked, you must obtain a building permit from Franklin County. So they come in, they fill this out, and if they mark that, they have to go to Franklin County.
that's the first I've seen this.
Me
mean,
too,
this
I
is-
saw it last week for the,
Yeah, I don't-
only because I've never asked for it.
Yeah, which one, I don't even know which one that is, I don't use that one.
It's a zoning.
Zoning certificate, yeah, we have a zoning certificate, so.
And then
See,
here's
this
the
is
actual
what,
fence.
we should not, when it comes to building a house or an addition to your house, the only thing we should be doing is giving zoning certification, not a building permit.
That's fine, we're not giving a building permit, we're giving a zoning certificate or a zoning permit. It's not a building.
Where do I see zoning certificate on our fee schedule?
Yeah, we give a zoning permit, which is simply a zoning certificate. You can-
Whatever
you can
permit,
terminology.
but it's zoning, it's
Yeah,
zoning
strictly
approval.
zoning. That's
Right.
right, because they have to know that we're good with it, since we're talking on this subject, right? Because they wanna make sure that the municipality's zoning authority is not, they don't overreach, right? They don't say, yeah, you can build this, and then they build it in the wrong spot, and we're like, hey, what are you doing, right? That's a line of communication, right, that's part of it. So, the fact of the matter is that these items,
We don't issue building permits,
no, we do not,
period.
No.
But we have been.
no. We don't issue building permits at all, I don't issue a building permit under any circumstances. That's the building
I'm
department's
sorry,
job.
maybe I'm looking at the fee schedule wrong, because the fee schedule says building permits on it.
Yeah, it might just be a missing terminology, but we don't issue a building.
I
permit
understand
under
that, I
any
understand
circumstance.
that, we don't, that's
We're
why I
not-
keep saying that we charge people a building permit
Yeah.
fee, but we don't give them a
There-
building
again,
permit. They
so-
still gotta go to Franklin
Yeah,
County to get
that's
it.
exactly right, we do a zoning permit,
Right,
as is within our
but that's
authority.
not the way, this is the first time it's ever been described as a zoning permit or
Right.
zoning, whatever the word is.
I've never described it in any different format since I've been here. I've
Well-
never said we need a building permit in my 3+ years here.
Well, but, this is going around in circles.
Oh, I know, but I don't know.
Because the
not me,
reason I
it's not
bring that up is because we've been charging people the fee for a building permit when all we're really doing, yes, we have.
We're charging for a zoning.
And maybe, you know, maybe I'm talking about times before you were
Yeah,
here.
before me, that's definitely
Okay.
true. Because we instituted a fee schedule referral with council after I was here. So we made sure that the fee schedule was approved by council for zoning fees and other.
Well, just
items.
because council approved it doesn't mean that it was
It's
done,
not an
it's
argument
right.
issue, it's still, the fees are approved.
I would definitely agree with that.
But what I just would like to ask you too, Lisa and Donna, is to take a look at this stuff, because here's the big one. If you will look at anything, what is it, look at 128211 and 1272 under driveways. Tell me how you can interpret,
I'm looking at all of it.
oh good, how you can
I don't know
interpret,
which
that's the
one, but I'm
big
gonna
one.
do it.
So the
How
fact
in
is,
the world
it
you can
doesn't,
interpret those two codes to say that we need to get a permit for a driveway
so
is
here's,
mind-boggling to me, Eric.
it doesn't matter.
I
At the
know,
end of the day,
it
you
doesn't
understand
matter,
that, right?
right?
So the
What
discussion
doesn't
here-
matter?
This doesn't, your point makes no difference on the discussions of this commission. It's not to say whether the interpretation is right or wrong, it's to say, do we need this, because we're gonna make the code
I
stand as
understand.
much. That's the
You're
purpose
right,
here.
you know, moving forward, we need to decide what we
That's the
want.
purpose.
What I'm trying to point out is that your interpretation is that inaccurate.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, you're
It's
entitled,
up-
that,
it is so
you're-
gray,
okay,
and it's up for
and now
interpretation.
Lisa,
Oh my gosh, you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't
Let's not
matter.
do this.
This is a stupid
It doesn't
conversation
matter
all
because
the
we're
time.
gonna decide what,
Yes, thank you.
how we want it to be. And then
Exactly.
council will figure out
I'm
what
sorry,
they want
this
to
is
do.
just,
You're just trying to make a point that you
Yes.
don't agree with Eric, and that's
That's
okay.
and I'd like to, I would like you to understand
Heard
why
it,
I
he doesn't
feel.
agree with you, you
Nobody-
don't agree with them.
And
Nobody
then
asked
you can take a look at these codes and make your own mind up.
Well, I'm not even gonna,
You
I'm not
probably
even
don't
gonna
care?
go there, because I'm just gonna look at them and say, is this something I think needs to be
Exactly.
permit, and be permitted?
That's
It
the
doesn't,
purpose.
Okay, that's fair, Lisa, you don't have to care, that's fine.
it's
About
not
that.
that I don't
That's
care,
not
it's
fair.
moot, Tony, it doesn't really matter.
Moot.
Well, it isn't,
If
it
we're
isn't
starting
new because
from
we're sitting here
scratch,
listening
okay,
to
I'm
him
not-
tell us
I'm not getting
about
into this.
this, that, and the other
And
thing, and
I'm
he's
gonna,
wrong.
are we done?
Yeah, we can adjourn if you like.
Yeah,
Yes, I would very much like to adjourn at 8:04,
Thank you.
or 9:04 PM.
Awesome.
Wish it was 8 over.
Yes,
We're all like,